Excuse me. Jeez, I just burped right into the microphone. Jeez. Okay. Well, talked about this quite a bit, but we've got like one more move, and then that's it. So, burp. Sorry about that. That was gross. Disgusting. Gosh. Uh, you don't have to. There's not that much guesswork in terms of this final piece of the puzzle. I've been very like hesitant to just be more definitive, but I'm gonna be pretty definitive about it. If we drop here, and I think we probably will. I mean, we may not, but I just think we probably will. We don't have enough on higher time frames. We're not oversold enough, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens, but I'm pretty sure we're going to come down today. I think it's going to be a red day. I think we're going to end the day low down here near like 520s or 530s. And I don't have perfect foresight, but that's my estimation for today. And if it doesn't do that and we break out, then we'll just need to make sure we find support, above here. But I don't think that's going to happen. I'm feeling it now. I'm feeling a lot more confident about the direction here. And what I kind of gathered from everything that we've been doing, there's always kind of back and forth with different kinds of breakouts, different kinds of maneuvers at the end. A lot of that has to do with what you see visually going on, the setups as they present themselves. And there's no doubt in my mind this is like a double top, almost a triple top distribution here. So my thought is that we're probably going to see, as this is, I think, a head and shoulder, we're probably going to see that leg down. And I don't think that it's a big question in my mind. I don't think it's a big concern in my mind. And the reason that most people don't want to, I think part of it's like most people just don't want to hear it, but I think that we're going to go back down to this 520 to 530 level. And then we're going to see a bottom. Now, if we happen to see a bottom sooner, then we need to just make sure we break over 550. But from my point of view, like, it's not that complicated. It might seem complicated because of the way that I do stuff, but it's really quite simple. Like, we've had kind of a double attack on this, and we're going to gear up to break out. And if we don't break out, then we're going to break down. And I think that in the grand scheme of things, going back and looking at the big picture here, I think I wasn't really looking for that second cat ear on the big picture until yesterday. I was like, usually that's what this is. You get that kind of big push up, and then there's a secondary move. And really all of this ends up being kind of a bottoming area. So I think that on the whole, this second cat ear is basically finished, except that it hasn't come down and tried to make a new bottom yet. And that's the final piece. So we'll see. We'll see how it works out. But there should be 1, 2, 3, and then a fourth one. And I don't think this is the fourth move. I think it's afterwards, after the top. So I think this is like the third move. And what we really don't want to see is we don't want to see a big hook. So what I imagine on AMC is pretty straightforward. You come down low, you retest maybe 532. Perhaps you come as low as like 530, and then we'll see. We may dip below that just a bit, and then you're going to basically top off Yeah, I'm just going to ignore that comment from Z-Man because clearly he's either brand new or he's just trying to troll. And we'll just let it be. Let sleeping dogs lie. Yeah, that's patently false, but okay. I mean, they do run together, but they also don't run together. It's pretty easy to prove that. So when we look at this as a backup period, I'm thinking that we're backing up, and yeah, time will tell if I'm right. So just be patient, I guess. But I think we're going to back up to the creek, and then we'll either advance or we won't. Speaking of GME, I think we're going to see the same kind of concept play out here, where we've already started the backup. We're going to see that pull back down, and at that point, I don't know for a fact that we won't go super low, because the way this set up yesterday kind of made me feel like we were already bottoming, but there's a couple different creeks here that we could sort of come back to, and one of them is pretty low. So I had speculated maybe 25.50 because of a measurement from a rising parabola. We have a rising parabola that has a diminishing range as you go to the upside. And then when it drops back to the downside, you would have a return either to 27.50 or 25.68. Well, let me put it this way, for those that are kind of talking to this Z-Man person, okay, I don't really need to prove anything to anybody, because while half of the YouTube videos, most of them are yesterday we're talking about GME having this explosive run and everybody talking about it going the upside. I was talking about it going back down. So, proof is in the pudding. If you do the TA and you're looking at it correctly, you're going to anticipate the moves as best you can. And sometimes you'll get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. But, all this hoopla yesterday about rocketing to the moon, that nonsense that people are like digging out stuff from like a million years ago saying it's going to happen now. None of that stuff happens, and then you're just stuck. And I was talking about, this is quite literally what I drew yesterday, was an advancement up here and then a drop back down. So, say whatever you want to say about me. I don't really care. My work will speak for itself in that regard. So right now, this is what I'm expecting. You can hear it or you can not hear it. I don't really care. But I do want people out there who want to hear it to hear it. And I don't necessarily think this is going to go down lower. So the way I drew this is very I don't want to say bearish, but it's essentially like dropping into Friday really low. It's important to note where these creeks are. We don't have support, good support beneath 27.30 until you hit 26.84, but that's not really where the creek is. The creek is significantly lower. So in my opinion, a breakdown from that 27.30 level probably leads pretty quickly to 26. And I do think that usually these kind of levels make sense. So I would go back and check and see what that is. And it's basically like a throwback to the top of the range. So it doesn't make sense that it might do that. Yeah. So there's a triangulation there that you can see pretty clearly. And I don't find that to be confusing at all. It looks to me like a retest on the top of the previous range. So probably there's some kind of a fib level there. Probably is usually the case. We could start from the original kind of break here, and that's there you go. Magic. What wizardry is this? Alchemy. It's just charting. So yeah, that's a again about as pompous as I'll get right there. Sorry about that. So this is a 61865 retrace from the breakout here. So, I'm not particularly bearish. It's not that. It's just that when you need to go back and build support, you need to go back and build support. So the sooner the better. So if we're going to go down, I'd prefer to do it early as opposed to what I did, which is really late. But this particular creek, excuse me, sorry. This particular creek has been not been met yet. So what I'm thinking is this one has, so I'm going to get rid of this one. What I'm thinking is we may or may not actually go above this one. If it's going to go lower, we probably wouldn't. Because what this would allow you to do is be like that, some kind of like latent up thrust. What this would allow you to do is then build out sideways and not cross until Friday. So if you went down really low today, by end of the day you're at 26 or something, you have now like pretty much all day Friday to sort of generate some kind of a cross here. And frankly, if you really wanted to push it into Monday, you could. I don't know at this point if this holds or not, but this is what I would imagine for the most part if it goes down low. Okay, if it stays high, then you're probably going to get across today, and you'll come across this area. If you jump this creek and you can find support, then you'll be in good shape to potentially advance going into Friday, which is kind of backwards from where you see max pain and all that stuff. Okay. So in this particular case, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 correction, maybe you could look at it more like an ABC, but I don't really think that matters. I've really only got 2 targets in mind here, and I think they're correct. I don't think the lowest target makes a lot of sense right now, although if we did go down to like fill that gap, it would be a retest of this bigger break that we had. I'm just not sure we're going to make that kind of move. That's a pretty significant downside move over the next day or so. And we're already at a place where I would look at GME and say it's pretty darn close to where I would expect that retracement to go. Like I may not even expect it to go below 27. So just saying 2608 or 2625 is actually kind of lower than I would prefer to go. Okay. So I think AMC and GME in this regard move much the same way. So here you go, going back down on AMC. Oh no, right? That's okay. This is important. We need to drop off this level. It's a big deal. This would be the place where you're going to go find the spot of rest, so to speak. And so what I observed yesterday is we probably would do this kind of business, and I think we've done it, but I probably just wasn't looking for it over here. Probably just the same thing. So I think this is your cat ear. Usually there's like what I call like a paw, right? Which is like an extension up and then a second and third. And I was saying yesterday, this looked really weird for a first ear. They're really pointed, but maybe it's just the second ear. It's already happened. You know, this is 1, 2. And then you pull back down. So we're back to 530s. Very much in line with what we were thinking when we got to this top. Definitely more likely than not, we were going to come back through here and then come low and retest a creek. So we're really close. I mean, we're really, really close. And I think this should be really encouraging to folks because if you see the right kind of bottom today and tomorrow, that good setup will bring you a huge move potentially Friday into Monday, you know. I can't guarantee it's going to be either or. It's too close to tell, unfortunately. The measurement is like Friday at 15:30, which is literally like 30 minutes before close. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me because usually we don't get a huge Friday move. That's not very normal for AMC. It likes to kind of pitter out on a Friday and then advance again on like Monday. But this is where I would see the build out going and then advancing. And at the end of the day, is this enough? You have to be patient here because there's going to be a big tell soon. I did not title this video as like clickbait. I'm titling it appropriately because in my opinion, This is kind of the bigger flush, and you're going to see that this is a shakeout. You either advance strongly or you're going to reject and head really, really low. So I want to see it advance strongly. I don't really want to see it come below 517, but I tried to chart it a couple different times, and I was able to kind of finagle my way to like 5. It's a little difficult to do that without losing a creek, which is distributive. Like it would be bad, it'd be like a markdown. So it's a little difficult to do that without losing a creek. I really think that the way we're built out here is this is your range, and we really don't want to come below like that 515 level. And I don't think it's designed that way. It looks to me like it's built out to be like 520. So I'm looking at this like thinking, yeah, this is good. I mentioned on IWM that when it started topping off back in May, this is when we had AMC and GME had their big run, was during that first bigger pullback. There was another advancement. This is back here. This is May 13th. This is when AMC and GME exploded to the upside. This is like 75 to 80% up this move. So the small caps were already running up. It's not a huge advancement, and obviously this is still back when it was range bound, but nevertheless, this was a big move, and it was like 70 to 80% up the move that AMC and GME finally like took off. And I marked it off because this is the very day that it actually took off. It's crazy looking, right? And then oddly, if you look at the 15th is actually the high for IWM, and that's when AMC hits the now infamous 548, which was the top of the range. So by the time IWM kind of reaches its final peak, AMC and GME took 2 days, ran up, and then came back down the very next day. So 3 days, and it's back to where it's going to now camp out right here on the 15th. So in terms of pattern analysis, the past is no guarantee of the future. Past performance is no guarantee of future performance. That's a real thing. You don't want to assume that it's going to be the same way, but it's a good observation that last time when it seemed like IWM was kind of topping, it had another push left in it, after it kind of had a bigger pullback. I expect something similar here. So I think that you need to have kind of one good pullback, and we did get that. This has happened. This is a big one. It broke out of the trend. And then from that point, usually there's a secondary upthrust, because the secondary upthrust is going to give sellers a chance to sell again. It's not a guarantee that it won't just keep going. Obviously people are going to look at it and say, well, it could just keep going. If our indicators are cool, it could. So you still want to watch 227, but typically like this is where you're going to see that advancement. And I honestly think it didn't get to 227, and I'm not saying like my numbers are perfect, but I had 227.13 and it got to like 226.40. So if it did go up again and have a secondary advancement, I'm going to be looking at that 227 again as like a possible top. And so during that time period, would it be reasonable to say that perhaps, though there's no guarantee, perhaps somebody's rolling one position into another, and we're going to see AMC and GME as kind of latent explosive moves again? Yeah, perhaps. It's not one of those things where I'm like going to bet the bank on it. I'm just saying like it did happen that way last time. So maybe there's some positions within this ETF that someone's trading and they're like, when it hits a peak, we're going to sell and then push up AMC and GME and really delay those moves a bit, because that's what happened last time. So they didn't participate really in this move, did they? They've been pretty much topping off while that's what AMC's been doing. It's like going sideways while this has been running up. So perhaps when we go sideways here a little bit and we find a top on IWM, this is the time for AMC and GME to really kind of blow up. So I really do think Friday and Monday, I think it's happening. And I think that the idea of the kitty cat ears I talk about is sort of a joke kind of thing at in some levels, but it's also not. the nature of it with the 1, 2, 3, 4 is usually like pretty consistent, meaning like it almost always has 4 distinct tops, and then you have 4 distinct pushes, and the fourth one is usually that one that could make or break you. And it's very obvious to me that that's the case here, because when you look at the big picture, it's like, okay, now we're dropping, right? We're no longer on this support. We're dropping it right now. And this would be your fourth move, right? If you look at RSI, if you have a rebound here, it's going to rebound. It's going to be your fourth move. It's going to be the final move, potentially. If this move manages to jump up and advance, and it's going to have to advance all the way to a new high, it has to. If that's what happens, then you're good. Like, it's pretty much confirmed at that point in my mind that, yeah, we're running, and you're going to have this explosive move to the upside, right? I'm just kind of drawing it to the side so you can see it. If, however, this generates what we call like a hook, where it probably would be, again, at 550s or something, that just makes sense because that's where the resistance is. If this generates a hook, could it be high? Could it be way up here? I guess so. And this is why, again, like, I don't say smart money, but I mean, institutional traders don't trade as heavily in terms of volume until it hits this SOS. That's where you see the huge buy-in. You'll see a significant pickup in volume on this exit, potentially, but once it gets to the top, that's where you see the massive volume pour in, because they're waiting for that confirmation from your main operator, the one who's pushing it. So this is going to be the last dip, in my opinion. Like, I don't think there's going to be another one. I don't see how it's visibly, I don't see how it's possible, and by the way, if and when this does hook and come down, you might say, well, dude, I get this whole cat ear thing, but couldn't this just be like a spring or something and reverse? Look, weird things happen all the time in the market, but my thought is that probably no. And like, at this point, you're now below like a whole lot of other stuff. It'd be really easy to just start kind of driving the price down. And this has happened so many times on AMC that it's really wishful thinking to expect a different outcome. Even if it happened to happen, even if it was like out of the blue it happened, I would not expect it to happen. So I know a lot of folks were looking at this thinking, well, it's going to come back really, really low. I don't see a clear path to like 460s or 450s that doesn't involve some kind of a major distributive top here. So at the best, you could say, well, maybe it's just this is distributing if it goes down. Again, this is hypothetical because we don't know what's going to happen after the bounce exactly. I'm pretty sure it's going to go up, but I could be wrong. And if it goes down, then you end up having to deal with a reality of distribution. And unfortunately, in this case, it is off the top. This isn't like a local distribution that's below the top. Like 548, I know that goes higher in a buying climax over here, but 548 is it's basically the top. So like, you have to look at this and say, well, that's where the supply is. You're not doing this kind of in the middle of a range. If we were way lower, we never came up all the way, we were like right here, and it just never came over the top, you could say like it's fine, like you can come back down. But that's not really the case here. You've now breached the top. You've come above it multiple times and rejected. Usually at this point, if it's going down, it's probably not going to go down to 450 and just stop. Like, you're probably going to start a full-on distributive cycle to come really low. And I mentioned that usually when the cat ear breaks down, the first thing that happens is you come back to the big creek. So this will be a pretty monumental sell-off. There's 380 again. That number comes up a lot. So I mean, you're talking about going from nearly $6 down to like 380, in a fell swoop. I think genuinely that's what could happen. Now, why am I even thinking about that? Because this is like a really critical moment. Previous to this, I haven't really given it too much thought about major downside because this is just a range build out, and we haven't really seen anything that makes me think it's going to be overly bearish. So aside from this top just kind of stopping an advancement, which is what happened when we hit like 532 up to 548, aside from that kind of stopping an advancement, there's not really been anything here that's been super bearish. So I've been looking at this and thinking, like, really to me it looks like a really good ascending accumulation, and what we're doing is we're basically creating a backup before a big jump. And that to me looks like the most likely probability. So I don't think anything overly negative about it, but now we're in the final kind of drop period. So this is where we've been waiting for this, you know. We've jumped the creek locally. You know, there's a wave here, and then we broke out across the wave. So we had a resistance, and then we jumped that resistance. We made a new local high here, according to the top that we had at like 560. Now we're coming back down. We're going to check that resistance. And if it pans out, this is it. You know, it's kind of like there's not really much else to talk about. If this works, it should just go up, which is great. It's a good place to be. Unfortunately, it's a very prudent time to talk about the potential for major downside, because you have to then consider, like, well, what if it doesn't? You know, what if it doesn't work out? So, you know, when we talked about this head and shoulder, we talked a little bit about how I think it's built out more around 5, and that was sort of the only, when we were talking about paths, how do you get to 5? The main path to 5 would be like pretty much now, like just driving the price really low to come back to that gap. And I think that's your main head and shoulder marker. Now, other people have looked at it and said, I think it's 550, 560, because they're looking at these bottoms and these bottoms. I don't disagree that that's a possibility, like is out there possibility for me, but I think that the head and shoulder neckline are pretty clear, built out around this white line that I've drawn, and it has a lot to do with where the neckline is, which is steep. It's not flat, you know. It advanced higher over here, which means that your shoulder really doesn't need to come all the way back down. That's kind of a myth, and I don't buy into that. If it's a very even keel head and shoulder, then yes, usually you're going to come back to so if you did a head and shoulder on this neckline or on this orange line, for example, you probably expect it to come right back, right? If this was very even keel head and shoulder, even if it has a slightly higher neck, you know, here, you're probably not going to see it go way up. It's probably still going to just check the same level. But in the case of this inverted head and shoulder, it's pretty steep. You know, we've got a really relatively steep neck. So do I expect it to come way back down here on a shoulder? No, not usually. That would indicate there's a huge amount of selling, right? And I mean, it's possible, but normally I would just look at this and say, okay, where is I'm basically just drawing the same chart here, but where is the neckline, you know? And then I would look at that and say, okay, well, does it make sense that this could come back and make a higher low? And usually my answer is yeah. It makes sense. And so I wouldn't look at this as, and by the way, one of the things I would use is like, is there a clear and evident creek there that it would catch on? That's usually your structure, right? And I think the answer is yeah. Like, I think there is. This right here, I think, is that wave. So if you're looking for it and you're like, well, I don't see that, I think it's right there. You know what I mean? Like, this is the wave that we jumped over coming up. And I think they created a new support and resistance, because you can see right here, resistance, support, support's higher. So again, this concept of like, do we have to come back down really, really low? Again, it's like, well, did this get built out? Yeah, it's right there. Is it the only place? No, it's not the only place. Obviously, there's another that's significantly lower, you know, and so you can look at these as levels of support and resistance as it comes back, and like observe like how it might go across them and so on and so forth. Okay. So these are things that I would be marking off right now because they matter. And ultimately, like, yeah, I think that this idea of coming all the way down to 450, We're not there yet. I think the way the creek's set up locally, you can see this yellow one. The way that we set up underneath here on these parallels, like everything kind of points to, you know, Friday into Monday, but really it's kind of Friday right down here, like that we probably wouldn't go beyond this point. And I think that's important because that's essentially looking backwards. That's essentially like this previous bottom, right? At 516. So that's my case for not going super low, is that I don't see how this is a healthy break right now. There's a lot riding on that, but we'll see. GME is kind of similar, you know, it's got the same kind of vibes in terms of like where those levels are. Like there's some common sense ones that are a bit higher. Would coming back down to do a throwback to this 2630 level, would that be a game changer? No, not really. Does it make sense of like a head and shoulder? No, not really either. You know, and GME is a little different because depending on how you draw it, the head and shoulder, if you think there's going to be a head and shoulder, right, which we don't really have one here as much as the other. If you think there's an inverted head and shoulder, it'd probably be easy to make a case that it's downward facing and that you'd end up having to come low, like really low, you know, to like 22 or something ridiculous. I've been able to make a soft case for 25.50. I haven't really been able to make a good case for coming that low yet. So to me, I think what makes the most sense is maybe coming back to this low liquidity area at 26.80 if we break 27.50. And then you're going to have that as like a bounce region. Probably that's it. It's the same deal. You know, when you look at this setup, I know I've got a lot of lines on my chart. Might be a little bit frustrating at times. When you look at this setup, this pink line that's right here, it's kind of Pepto-Bismol color. It represents like a channel marker, right? And so during this ascending accumulation right here, it went parabolic right there and it pushed through it. And then notice that it breaks down right as it enters again into it because it's basically like it extended beyond the channel and it's getting knocked back down. And you'll notice that that doesn't go low. It goes to like 27.20, you know, so that's a very, very strong place for us to find support if buyers step in. They should be able to hold support there. It's been support for like a month plus now. It doesn't really make sense that you would just lose it. However, remember, like there is also this element of flushing, as we call it. And because GME came over the top, you might say that it could be prone to going through the bottom. And so what I would say there is, again, measure out to maybe where that 50 is, the 50% marker from the top through about 50% of the range here on that ascending. And you can see it's following it pretty closely. I mean, you can argue about the technicals, I guess, but the nature of this is pretty solid. You know, you can see it's chewed up right along the middle there quite a bit. So we're at the middle right now, right underneath it. So this would be a logical place. Again, what if you distributed Booksy and you came low? Yeah, I mean, you could see it. It's not complicated. And you can see that the whip around, if you want to say that, so like a flush up, a flush back down, the 50-50 swing on that would take you back down to the level we talked about. Like I didn't pre-plan this. I'm just looking at it and I'm just showing you what I'm doing live. But the fact that, hey, that hits the same level we were just talking about, does that surprise me? No, because usually those flushes, if they're going to do a double flush, make some sense. So do I think that's inevitable? No. Do I think that it's likely, more probable? Yes. Highly, highly probable compared to some other options that we might have. And that's good because in addition to that, if you look back, there's a longer standing trend. I don't want to say this comes back from, I'm going to go back to like the beginning. Yeah, so it comes back from this really early cross here, which I've marked off on the chart. A lot of stuff will emanate from this because this is the build out for the exit. It happens before you actually get to the bottom, and a lot of stuff happens from that. And I think I did like a fan from there to the bottom over here where it intersected this other one. And there's, I know it's complicated, but it's a triangulation really that there should have been a final support here, and there was, but we haven't actually checked that line again, so it would be very close to that and probably check it again. So, I mean, it's just another little tidbit of information. And below that, you can see, hey, there's no lines down here, Booksy. You don't have a lot down here. Yeah, because that's a big gap area. Like, if you drop from here, you're looking at 24, and then you're looking at 2380. I mean, that's it. You know, I don't have anything else there that would really necessarily catch. So, right now, I think there's a strong probability if we don't break out of this current creek that we're in, which is just a downtrend from the top on Wednesday. If we don't break that today, what I would suggest is that we're probably going to gap fill here and then head down to 2630 area. So again, is this bad? Is this bearish? No, it's not. In fact, this is almost, I would say, necessary because you need to get out, do the final shakeout, final accumulation off of a major support. This is a major support down here. This is like a test for advancement to see if you're going to advance, and then you're backing up to get liquidity and to check levels for support. If you catch support higher, great. Maybe you can advance sooner. If you catch support later, great. Doesn't make a huge difference. Ultimately, it's a good retracement. Ultimately, it does solve something, you know. And at the end of the day, like, this is always what we see. There's a rapid ascending, right, that basically goes parabolic, and then you get a pullback, you get a buy-in, and then as long as it's bullish, right, it should finish. It should accelerate quite rapidly to the upside. We're seeing a little bit of green today. We'll see what happens. You know, if you're wanting to watch it and see on your own today, like, well, where do I know if it's flipped and it's not going back down? It's really not that complicated. You know, look at the major downtrend here locally. If it's underneath that, it's not broken out yet. If it's underneath 548, it's not broken out yet. Right now, if we were to advance back up to about 548, we would probably be stuck underneath this trend. So you'd have both resistances to deal with. So don't overthink it, you know. If you see a little bit of green, I don't think it means a whole lot just yet. It could mean something later, but at least right now I'm like, meh, you know, probably just finding its footing, you know, and seeing what we can see here, and maybe going back and testing a supply level here or there, right? I still expect at least one more down. But hey, like I said, if there's a change of character and it doesn't continue down from here, even though it already kind of broke through and tested that low at like 532, which is great, I would just watch it above 550. I mean, I can't prevent any kind of price action from happening, nor can I like perfectly predict everything. So if this were to advance over 550 and then continue, we can open up a whole nother chapter and say like, hey, what would happen if this or this or this? I don't want to go there right now because I don't think it's as likely. I think we're kind of teasing out right now bulls that are overly optimistic, perhaps, but that's just my estimation. So yeah, we will see. It's hard to say, you know. I think on the one hand, you probably could make an argument on some of these time frames that like RSI has kind of come low enough, it looks like it's finished. You know, hey, it hit that mark, that first marker, Booksy, so maybe it's not going to go any lower. It hit 532, so maybe it's not going to go any lower. You know, if somebody wanted to argue that with me and say, yeah, I think it's not going to go lower, I would be like, okay, I mean, I could see it, but I'm just not of the opinion that that's what's going to happen. So I think we'll piddle out and come down today. I don't know what's going on over here. Is it possible that AMC just rips? Well, I mean, what do you mean by is it possible? I mean, is it possible that AMC drops to $1 all of a sudden? I mean, the statistical likelihood is near zero, but like, it's possible. I mean, I don't know. We hit 532. So one of the levels that we had marked off was 532. And I said 530 down to, I marked it off right here. There's a big old fat arrow on it. I said, it's possible that that's where the support is, because you can see here, previously, this is where we built out, support and resistance across this range. So it's a sort of a center support and resistance. So yeah, if it broke out right now, would I bat an eye? No. But at the same time, like, this is what I drew because I thought that it probably would have some kind of an advancement today. Again, just to sort of head fake and then come back down. If I'm wrong, it will come up above 550, it will build support, and then it will go. So if you're asking me, like, if it can happen, yeah, it can happen. Maybe this is enough. Maybe it's enough that we hit 532 again, and that's all we needed. My thought is we're probably going to build more or less like a floor on 532, something like this, and then drop down low, maybe near the end of the day or something. Because what I think we're doing is we're buying up and then dropping, buying up, dropping, buying up, dropping, until we can't do that anymore. So I think we're going to see it chop steadily to the downside until we can get below 532. I think the goal is still down here around 520s, this particular floor. And there's a high liquidity shelf here at 525. So again, it's like there's a lot pointing towards that region. And so I'm not going to like flinch every single time that I see green on the chart today. It's up 0.18%. There's a sense of like, for some folks, they're just holding shares and they're just kind of waiting, or they're holding call options, or just kind of waiting for a big move. For other people, they're trying to like wait for a good entry. There's no bad entry here, because I'm not talking about dropping $1. I'm talking about dropping like 20 cents, and then probably coming back up no matter what. So even if it's bearish, I'm still talking about coming back up. So it's like, is this really like a horrible place to enter anything? No. I mean, for options and stuff, you got to deal with decay and all that junk. Is it possible that this is not the best entry? Maybe. If it continued to chop down, your options might get chewed up a little bit. But we've seen this repeatedly on AMC and in other areas, and there's actually very little in terms of volatility, like implied volatility changes that happen from the bottom of a spring all the way up to the SOS. It's very odd. You would think that there would be some kind of massive change. Usually it's a pretty subtle change, and we've seen that from the bottom here at 430 all the way up to 570. There really hasn't been a hugely significant leap in value. It just hasn't been, and I know some people got the bottom because we called it out and we looked for it and we watched it build out, and I didn't want it to go down that low. I made that pretty clear, but I also let it happen. So I charted it from there, and it looked like a iteration, and I gave you guys a bunch of targets to the upside, and almost all of them hit until this point, right? Well, some people played that. I didn't play it. So some people played that and they made good money. But what I noticed was that, at least on my part, the longer term calls didn't really change value much. They kind of stayed pretty flat. So your operators are pretty good at keeping everything in check until the last possible second. you know, and then it explodes. And why wouldn't they be? Because if they're accumulating, they don't want to set things off too quickly. So, anywho. So do I think there's going to be a big move? Yeah. Do I know 100% which direction it's going to go? No. But I think initially the direction is clear. First down, then back up. When you come back up, you're going to have the big checks. I don't know, again, for a fact with what exactly might happen with IWM, but I would say right now that we should be in some kind of a consolidation or topping period. We should be working our way. This looks like an M cross down to me, like jump. We should be working our way and backing up a bit just to get indicators cooled off and we can start talking about whether or not it's reaccumulating or distributing. I haven't really looked at this very closely. I mean, there's clearly some kind of a wall built at 221, but that makes sense because when we came up, that was a support right here. You can see the jump over it. So anytime you see these kind of waves, you should just kind of make a mental note, like right there. This was like a push out. So we've come back to that and tested it. There's not much else to say. We haven't really tested anything else yet. We did jump like a local trend down. So there's that. Just so happens I kind of had it drawn there, but we've jumped that. I think most of what I would look for on like IWM, which is your Russell 2000, is just waiting to see what happens if it comes back up, you know. And I wouldn't imagine here as a bad place to see some serious chop either. If we're talking about just kind of gently buying in or repositioning, that's one thing. But what we have here is a historic run. I mentioned that on the 4-hour and even at the daily, IWM has not been this overbought or didn't become this overbought in the last decade or more. It was a really crazy run. So for us to maintain that would be pretty crazy, you know, to keep going even though we were super overbought. And I was cautioning people as early as like 218 because I was like, you know, I got 220 and 227 as targets, but we're already like super overbought. Could it continue to move up? Yeah. You can see back here in December 2023, this was the first big push out here on this wave. It took a toll, right? And it took a long time to get up here, but once it got there, this is obviously way faster is what I'm trying to say. But once it got there, is this ultimately the top, right? When it hit 82 on the 4-hour? No, it's not. It actually backs up for a period and then it goes up again, you know. So much the same, does this have to be a topping period? No, but I would probably expect it to come back down a bit. So if we have a second push up here and it hits 227, I would watch your 4-hour RSI and see if it makes a lower RSI. So see if when it hits 227, if it's weaker. Because if it is, then it could indicate that you're kind of double topping, where you're getting like a higher price action with a divergent RSI. And then you might be in for like a more, I would say, steeper retracement. This is sort of hypothetical still because I don't know if this is even going to go back up to 227 right now. But that might be where you need to come back down. And I don't think these indicators need to go back to zero. I think probably just coming back underneath 60 would be enough, you know, to cool off. And we'll see. Long term, I do think that it would make sense for this to come back to 210. But seeing as this is back in the previous range, it's kind of a tricky proposition because you're basically saying that you expect it to chop right back through. I'm purposely having this chart really wide right now so you can see it, hopefully. You're basically talking about coming back down and retesting the floor. I don't think we made any kind of test on it. We just kind of broke past it. So it would be logical to me to come back to about 210 or at least maybe 214 here and retest and make sure that we're actually going to hold these levels up high, and then we can advance and break to new all-time highs. Advance here, advance above 230. We'd need to build support here. We've never built support here. And again, could that happen after we go to 250? Sure. It could be 250 and then back down to build support. It doesn't have to be while we're doing it, clearly. This is clearly went right past it, hasn't even looked back. But make no mistake, like IWM has been pretty good about checking its levels for the most part. And when it doesn't check its levels like it did during COVID, it just kind of broke out and kept going. It did this during COVID and it stayed, you can see, pretty overbought for a long time. But eventually it has this massive retracement. So it really is dependent, I think, largely on maybe the goal here. If the goal is just to get to all-time highs and then sell off again, then you're going to end up way back down later testing those levels that you skipped over, essentially. So, it's a trade-off. On the one hand, you get a bigger run locally, it goes straight up, cool, you make a bunch of money, but then you spend another year and a half or whatever retracing or whatever it may be, because at this point, once it gets to that high at 252, which is my target, 252.91, something has to happen. Either consolidates and continues back to the upside and hits the 300s, or it's going to chop and drop. And I think that what I'm always looking for is just simple support. Like, I want to see it have support. I would prefer it to come back down and check this level and then advance. And that's how I'm going to speak about it. So that would be a healthier way to advance, because then we could kind of stair step out and we don't have to come back later. Longer term, it's better. It's healthier. Shorter term, you may not find that as attractive, I guess. That makes sense to me. So AMC is back down to 541. Nothing really to say other than it's back beneath that trend. It looks like a wick up, and it looks like it stopped at 545. So I hate to add like another line on my chart, but like locally, 545 is going to be one that we'll have to test again since we double top there. I hate to do that, but I have to at least mark it. And then I don't think I need to add anything else to GME. It actually came back up to the 2830 level that we had marked off here. And that's pretty much where it stops. So, yeah. So at this point, we just kind of wait and see what happens with this candle. And the next couple candles, I guess, going across here. If we do chop around 2790, we'll have to wait and see until it gets back to the creek again. I don't think we're going to have a lot to say about it. I think it just wicked off of it too. I think that looks like it hit directly on it. So, yeah. Never ignore cat ears, okay? They're always a breakdown. Never ignore that double wave at the end of a range, because it's always like a push up with a breakdown beneath something, and then it drops if it drops, right? Sometimes it's bullish. If it's like ascending, it can be really bullish. This one was clearly dropping below some very evident supports here. And ultimately, like, that always ends up being a really significant creek. So you should always draw it, because in terms of a wave, think about it like the last major tangent. Does that make sense? So if you're looking at this like a wave up, this would be like the last major definition of like down, like which the direction of resistance right here. So the wave up and then back down, where was the last major resistance? Right here. Does it make sense? So that way. So I always think about it like that. And then this is a debatable one, because sometimes these are in different orders of height, but this is another one. This is kind of your outermost one. So you have two here that you could use sort of in tandem to help you with breakouts on a wave back out. That's what you ultimately want here, right? So jumping over these two would give you a breakout. being rejected under one of these two would probably result in more downside, or at least more consolidation for a time. So, okay. All right. He doesn't add the other line. Yes, that's correct. Luke, you've got the right idea. There's no finish to this until 548 with support. So at the end of the day, if you're just looking for bottom line on AMC, absolute bottom line, you really got to get over 548 with support. Once that happens, you should see it advance pretty quick to the new highs. Like it should come back above that 573 top, because that's really where you're going to make a bigger, more significant move, I guess. So that would be the measure of success here. All right. So for today, I'm going to focus mostly on just checking these levels as we go. I don't expect to just have it rip, but I'm also only just one person with one opinion. So if you're like looking for other opinions, I'm sure there's plenty out there. And you guys are more than welcome to share your thoughts if you want to in the chat. Yeah, so I answered a lot of these questions before, and but Josie did ask, what if could they fill that gap at 5? My answer is yeah. I mean, you could get there in a few different ways. It's hard for me to see them getting there by Friday. If they wanted to hold the creek and still get there, it would probably be like Monday. They could delay the Friday action and just really chop. Does that make sense of other targets that we found? No, it doesn't. But if you were really bent on keeping it bullish and getting the 5, you could potentially hold off on any big move until Monday or Tuesday and chop this way. Does that make sense? Because like you can see here, like you could go across here and not break any creeks. I don't think there's an easy path directly to 5 right now without some kind of a breakdown somewhere. Because as I've kind of stated and restated a couple times, 520, maybe down to as low as 515, maybe 517. I wouldn't say 515, but like something like that. That area is kind of my bottom right now. I don't think that there's I don't think there's a super clear path. I know it looks like there would be, because you're like, well, it looks like it's just support. You just come back down there. Yeah, but you'd have to go low here, right? So in the event of that, it's hard to argue that you can get there without, at least not by Friday, without breaking something pretty major, you know. If we don't have some kind of major upthrust here, like going back up to 548, and for whatever reason we kind of dropped low and like piddled down into like Tuesday, I probably wouldn't be like hyper bearish about it. So if we didn't ever come back up and do some kind of upthrust, like let's just say it kind of gently comes down, this is a little different, because this would be a very unique situation of like, oh, we're just pinning it. What we could probably look for is iteration at that point and see if it makes sense. Be a little bit nervous about like a curtain drop, as I call it, where it like lays flat and drops, but this is a possibility, you know. Like I don't really have this one on my chart because I think the others are stronger supports, you know. And because part of me thinks that they left a gap at 5 for another reason. I mean, it's at 504. It's almost exactly at 5. And you think about long term on here, where would you maybe want to come back to in the future, potentially? 5's a good number, you know. We got 5 and we got 3. And those are gaps that I don't really want to fill way later, but do I think that they may just be there as markers, for like a future drop way in the future or whatever, or even going into November or something, sure. The design here might be, yes, we're going to double up thrust and then head back down to 5. And then rip. Maybe, you know. Maybe that's the goal here. But I could just as easily see them, again, bringing it out from like via an LPS or something at like 525 and just leaving it for later, you know, for way later. And you might think like, again, like, hey, you can't do that. Well, you can if it makes sense, you know. I suppose my biggest argument for coming back to 5 right now is this head and shoulder. I mean, I mentioned that maybe like 30 minutes ago now, but we were talking about this head and shoulder. I think that's probably the easiest way to argue that we dropped low to like 5. And I think that there's a measurement here off this peak. And if you don't use the trends, I'm using the trends. I know there's a lot going on my chart, but hopefully you can see it. I'm using these trends that are going up, right? These are, I think, the parallels for this kind of rising wind up and unwinding. If you use the trends, it wouldn't come below, like, again, 518. It just wouldn't, because it wouldn't break that trend. Typically, that's the way we see it. But if you use the measure out, it's really close. Like, you could probably make an argument that it could drop below it, which is, again, measuring from the peak here to like the first bottom, you don't really see that. But if you measure from like the peak to the second bottom, this is, again, just that unwinding type deal. Some of you are like, what do you mean unwinding? You mean they're selling those positions off? I don't know why it's symmetrical. Sometimes it doesn't really make sense to me, but it is. So if it's because they're selling positions from down here, they're making money on it, maybe it's a way for them to drop the stock. Does this get you back to 504? Yeah, gets you back to 5 almost exactly. So you could make an argument, I think, that it's going to go back to 5 to gap fill, finish the head and shoulder, hit that marker, and then just go. I think that's a valid argument. So I'm not going to sit here and like tell people that they're wrong if they think it's going to go to 5 or something, like, and fill the gap, because I think there's an argument to be made for it, a good one, like a healthy TA based argument that it's still a valid area. And then yeah, locally that could be like a, you know, like a spring action on this upper range, where if it hits 5 and then rockets back up above 520, and then you're just good to go. That's how I would look at it. Spring versus no spring kind of thing. I'm talking about this little upper range here that goes from like roughly 518 to, you know, 550. And that would make sense to some degree. So it would look like probably like this, where it would bounce and then drop, and then very quickly would recover, and then basically you just exit now this creek, and that's how you would jump that creek, and then you would just go all the way back to the top. Pretty similar. This is just a spring basically with a workout. And the big picture on the springs is always like, well, why do you have a spring? Because you're trying to jump a creek really low. It probably would be even lower than this. I drew it really, really high. You'd probably be like down here. Like while they're going across the bottom here, they're also jumping the creek, and then you have like a final dip, and then it just goes. That's a path for 5. And it makes sense, you know, from a range perspective, like how and why you might do that. So I know there's folks that'll talk about max pain all day and how it's got to go to max pain and this and that. Well, here's your path to 5, you know. I don't think it's that invalid. I think it's a decent one. And I've had it on the radar for a while. I actually thought we might do that earlier when we were first coming up here. We might go ahead and head back to 5. maybe like not even that long ago now. Feels like forever. I feel like early this week I was talking about it, and then I just sort of keep changing my mind. Yeah, I favor 532 and 520 more, I guess, for other reasons. Looks like GME is coming back. This is like a double up thrust. It did advance, had a double bottom here on 27.24. That's good. It is a gap zone, as you can see from the 16th, 15 to 16th, which was Monday, Tuesday. It double bottomed above that gap zone and rose up. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to run. And it's important to note that, like, a lot of times that's kind of how we started distribution. I went back and looked at this, and the double tops and the double bottoms often will do a kind of strange, like, up thrust motion. So, like, first this has a double top, and then it goes down and tries to bottom. But you can see, like, the double bottom here actually led to a breakdown. So it did rise, but then it led to, like, a cat-ear breakdown, right? So something similar could be a foot here. You know, I don't want to overdo it, but a lot of times these things are iterative, as I call it, which means they are recycling a pattern of behavior. So would this make sense as a recycle pattern? Yeah, because you're now, where are you breaking though, Booksy? You'd have to be breaking, you know, this is the top, this is the middle. So if I wanted to distribute again, I could do pretty much the exact same thing I just did here. I could do it lower and attempt, that's the key word, attempt to drop it down off of this support here at 27.72, which we've seen, attempt to drop it down there by using kind of a sideways action. This would be very boring up until about noon, and then you would potentially see it like break down. And it, again, could it be pretty harsh? Probably. You know, I don't know. I don't really know how else you would measure it. I don't think it's necessarily the first leg, but this is like a big 1, 2 here. So 1, 2, and then you come down low. My thought is it probably would head down and fill the gap at 26 and just sort of stop there today. And then we'll see what happens. So, yeah. So let's say in theory this is the way GME moves, and it does this sideways bit, chops for a while, becomes nearly, you know, on like the 6 minute, it might even look like it's starting to become overbought or something, even though it's just chopping. This is just an idea. I don't know for a fact this is going to happen. I'm just looking at this thinking, well, if it compresses, that would be sensible. If you're just trying to drop it again to the gap, this would make sense. Was there a place that AMC does something similar going into, let's say, noon today or something? Well, we didn't really see that kind of motion, well, not one-to-one anyways, on AMC. We kind of saw it top off in a different way. So yesterday, this was way high while AMC was already dropping. So we're looking at roughly that noontime hour, and yeah, and AMC was kind of already pretty low. Like, it didn't hold up a support as well. It was already beneath. We kind of came right back above 550, and I was like, yeah, it's probably just a secondary distribution. You come over top again, sell down. These buy-ups are huge, you know, which is good. But this is the pattern that we're kind of replicating here, so I don't know. It doesn't really have as strong of a pattern, if you will, but I suppose if you wanted to see it do the same thing, I'm not even sure what it would look like. Not really seeing anything here that's like obvious. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it would just be like another kind of flat top, I guess. I mean, there's not really much else to say. I would chop along this guy, I suppose, until it can't hold it anymore and then drop off of it. Seems like a strange way to go about it, but this could drop you beneath the support here at 532. And then maybe you see something similar. It's starting to look more like a parabolic move. AMC likes to do that, and I don't want to see that, but it does like to start moves like and accelerate them. We see it more often on this stock than I think anywhere else I've ever seen it. Where like the next creek actually is lower, and it creates this like massive slide. If that were to happen, I might even be inclined to say 5 is more likely. So if it doesn't build out all the way to the creek again on the next push, like it doesn't come all the way out here, we're gonna have to be careful, because yeah, sometimes that can be bad. AMC starts like an acceleration, and then it ends up being like this big, I call it like a beak. I usually call it like a beak or something like that. But, you know, kind of have it drawn that way anyways, that it would have some kind of accelerated drop at some point. We'll see. Could you take a look at SBUX? Sure. Take a look at SBUX. SBUX. Right. So AMC and GME both relatively flat right now. We will monitor as it goes. This is a very important time for them both, so you know, I'll do my best to keep up to date on them. I'll flip over from charge point to look at SBUX just really quick since the chart's open. Let me just observe. Nothing really to say. Just consolidation along the top here at 221. Makes sense. This is an important support and resistance level. When we came down, makes sense that we would need to check it. Nothing else to really say just yet, except that I think it still could come back down and test the top at like 2. So watching for that, seeing if it comes back down to 2. Otherwise, looks fine. Really not much to say. Kind of expected it to come down and maybe drop a little more. So Starbucks. Close. It's not quite a divergence, but it's pretty, I think it's strong enough that I would call it one, because like these are pretty darn close bottoms, right? Like these are nearly the same. We need to see if it's had a breakout yet, and if it hasn't, there's still a chance it could make one more low, because it didn't actually come below the bottom. So I know that sounds weird, but if you're looking at this as like a range, that means that potentially this could be like a secondary support, and you could still have a spring. But if I'm looking at this and I'm trying to be as objective as possible, yeah, there's a lot of space here. What's going on with Starbucks? It's had a rough few quarters. We need to look at this big. This actually could be a really good chart, because it looks like it's in a. Oh. Oh, okay. You guys are like, what? Interesting. So this is March, May. That's fascinating. It was already going up into October. So locally, it kind of looks like a bottom. To me, I mean, that looks like a really strong weekly divergence. Check that out. But I mean, it's not, here's the problem, right? And I know you guys are going to be like, what? This is also like a hook. I can see it like visually. So right there, and then right here. So I'm not down on it. I think it's probable this is like a spring out of that breakdown. So you can see that there's a bit of a wedging action here. I know this is just an M. Yeah, it's just a question of where you think support will be found. So long term, as a play for shares, this is a very good place to buy, I would say, like on the whole. I don't know if it's going to make another low, and if it does, it could go back to 65.84. The shorter term indicators make it seem like it's kind of bottoming. So I feel like if it's sort of bottoming here, that it could have a major, major explosive move because there's a huge amount of space. Yeah, it's kind of pinching. There's a huge amount of space, I think. I wouldn't look at those tops. I would look at these secondary tops. I think those are up thrusts. Yeah. This is a weird chart. I would look at these guys, though. Well, maybe it does go back to the top. That's better. Okay, so that's your cross right there. So historically, this would be your bottom. Wasted memories, the first target 755 over 6 area. If we make the SOS a move, it's 755, and then if we get the secondary extension, it should be like 15 plus. I don't think it's going to be an infinite move. I think it's going to go to 15 to 18 because that's where the high creek is. I don't think we're above it, so we're probably going to reject under it right now. Okay. Actually, it looks sooner than that. So, yep. There's a couple different ways to do these, interpret these, you know, and I think that there's a little bit of danger maybe in the way I'm doing it right now because there's a sense of eminent move like now. I mean, it's basically August 5th. So it would suggest that the bottom here is August 5th, and then you're going to jump the creek. I know it's a bit strange, but I would probably, again, suggest that this is still a really good place for entry regardless, because we don't know if it's going to do this and come up, or if it's going to build out like underneath here and have one more drop and then jump the creek. But there's a suggestion here that I usually find on these intersections, which is that this is roughly where it hits a bottom. So of the next wave down, this should be like a potential low. And that's about as far as I could take it, unfortunately, with that. But it's not yet over the creek, so it's still in like a bottoming. And until it breaks out, you can't really assume anything. So what we would do is just look at, is this a strong enough bottom right now? My answer is I think it might be. You know, on the weekly it got to be overbought, oversold, and then it bounced. But this also happened back here, and I think it got oversold early. It bounced, and then it didn't actually break the creek. You see that? It's like, I think this is different because of the buy-in. Look at that massive spike in volume. This is not quite the same. You can see the difference visually, but I'm just throwing out an example. Like this went up and it actually didn't continue even though that was overbought. This one's different, right? It did. So it got really oversold. It got really oversold, and then it just kind of rocketed back out. So kind of a mix of the two. Does it really matter? No, because in both cases it was historically like a good buy-in point. So yeah, I'm bullish right now on StarBucks. I'd say I'm pretty bullish on it. And all things considered, it's making higher lows. So if this breaks out, I don't think that it stops at you know, $100. I think you could probably expect it to have some kind of a pretty significant rebound here, and then probably, I mean, I don't know exactly. This area's all been traded, so there might be some stops here, but I would think it would go right back to the top. It's a big trade. Probably a healthier trade to make on, you know, on a share-based basis, but if you were going to do like leaps, I would say 2026 is probably far enough. I would be comfortable enough with that. Let's see if there's anything else here that needs to be addressed. Remember how like every jump is like a M cross or whatever you call it. So like this is probably where we were breaking through. So if you're looking back at like, why did it even make this bounce? Well, I'm sure there's a trend somewhere that goes up here, and I was kind of looking for it. I haven't seen it yet. It's probably down here to here. Is usually the case, right? This is pretty low. So that's kind of discouraging, right? Is you're like, oh crap, it's like super low. We haven't revisited the bottom. It's going to go all the way down to $30. I mean, I guess it could. There's probably a middle though, and more often than not, you know, that's going to be a support. So yeah, I don't know. This is a tough one. Long term, it kind of makes it look worse, but it's also, you got to look at it and think like, well, it's still, I mean, this was in 2008, the crash. This was super oversold starting way back here, and it was oversold all the way basically down through the bottom, and then just really fast. But I mean, that would have been probably one of the best times ever to buy this thing, you know. If you had bought it then, it would be up 3,000% now, you know. So if that were to occur, it'd be pretty violent, I would think, and be very fast. It'd have to look like a market crash. But this is not, I don't know, this isn't the same time. The weekly moving average is in a bad spot, I would argue. We're already kind of dipping below it twice. It's funny how like zooming out changes your perception of things. So here's what I would say about this. I think we're right about where that creek is here, because I think it's going to meet up with that moving average. So I think this is going to be a really important zone right here for the 87 mark. I think it's very likely that even if you're going to go down, that you're going to come back up to 87. So if I'm looking at this objectively as I possibly can, even if it were to come back down, which again, I'm not really sure that's what's going to happen here. It's a pretty large buy-in. Even if we're going to come back down, I'd say you'd want to come back to this creek, which is going to test the weekly moving average. So a safe trade for Starbucks at this point might be a 30% trade back up to 87. And then a secondary trade would be like if it breaks back above there, probably heading back up towards this top. It might take a little bit longer. It's hard to say. I'm going to use an angle here. It's a pretty good trade though. I mean, the sky's the limit for these kinds of, I mean, Starbucks is huge, you know, worldwide. I don't feel like it's going to have, for some odd reason, I mean, unless there was like a huge coffee shortage or something all of a sudden, I don't think there'd be any major issues. People still buy Starbucks even when it's like $20 a cup, so it's always been expensive. Like, I don't know. That's how I feel about it. Yeah, I think that you're gonna want to watch it here, and then that's kind of a middle zone, and then and it makes perfect sense too. I love that kind of stuff. I love to see that level intersect like multiple things. Like it intersects the weekly, it intersects the downward creek, it is a rebound off of a middle and a potential middle from across. It's a breakout of this creek. It's a pretty logical place if you look at in terms of like a trajectory, like out. It works as a trajectory out. You know, this is a steeper trajectory, but it would be one that you would use from like the more recent ones. So we could use like a fan, and you could see like this is a 112, 107. So you can invert that and say like, oh, well, where's the steepest intersection? You know, and you'd say it's 107. I mean, it's pretty clean. It looks like it would get there by December. So it's sort of a Santa rally, end of the year kind of rally is what it looks like to me. So probably a really good time for like, again, leaps for next year, whatever, if you're thinking it bullish. And then I don't know about from there. I think that's where things get a little more speculative, perhaps, on whether you think this needs to come really low. And I could imagine it, because this is a support, I could imagine it dropping potentially and having like a spring down to the historic trend and then going. But there's got to be some kind of a catalyst for that, I think, beyond just normal market mechanics. In this case, just because of what it is, it'd be hard for me to justify that kind of a drop. Otherwise, I think kind of chop here and then out over time seems more likely to me. So I like this chart though. It's a good chart. I might even consider getting some leaps on it if I can afford them. It's a good chart. A $10, $100 per month on $10 coffee. Oh yeah, I was thinking about Point Break the movie, because that's the point where, you know, the wave breaks, right? It's like the place you got to catch the wave. So it's appropriate for our day-to-day, because it's the point where you want to catch the last wave right before it moves. So yeah, it is a movie reference, but I know, right? So it's hard for me to see Starbucks dropping rapidly without some kind of a catalyst drop reason. So I don't know. There could be like a coffee bean disease or something all of a sudden out of some lab in Brazil. It's like, I don't know. A bunch of Wall Street punks sent a disease to the coffee bean lab in Brazil. I don't know. I have no idea. You got to give me some. You guys are like, that's a good conspiracy theory, Booksy. How can we drop Starbucks so we can make billions? I don't know. I just don't know why you wouldn't just have a LPS here, I guess. It feels like more right to me, so not a spring. That's really the only difference between these two. One's an LPS and one is a spring. But I think either one is possible. So this is a good chart, though. Thanks for bringing it up. I think it's a good one because, yeah, there's a lot of possibility there for decent options contracts. I wonder if there's anything cheap for January at like $90. Should check it out. Curious now. Piqued my curiosity. There's a lot of selling here too on this side, but it still looks like it's been holding up pretty well. I think locally this is the debate I have, is I don't know if it's going to go below 71 again. there's enough space there that it could do it. There's plenty of room. I have to kind of interpret this area. I'm purposely going more short term now. Yeah, it jumped. It jumped that creek, so it's trying. What about the daily? Where's the daily moving average? The daily moving average is near this gap. So probably would cross it near the gap. Like near the gap fill. That makes sense. What about the 4 hour? It's a little lower. Probably cross that near this top. These are all the levels you'd hit on the way out. And then where's like 2 hour? Pretty much same deal. This one would be probably when you jump over the creek. You'd probably hit this guy. It's funny how they're always like in a perfect spot, like mathematically. We know that that's like a 50-50 kind of thing usually, but I just find it to be kind of curious. So this is 2 hour would give you a pretty clear range. The 2 hour and 1 hour give you a pretty simple like bracket for breakout levels. Like these both kind of wrap the creek. So I think this is a likely place to see some kind of a, I know it's right at earnings too, but it'd be a likely place to see some kind of a consolidation. So anyways, just curious where those were. And then 30 minutes right where we are now, which is this creek jump. Fun stuff, right? Isn't that interesting though? It's always like right in the right place at the right time. And then look at the low here. Look at where the 15-minute was. It's like, oh, look at that. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think probably gives you a pretty good indication of where you might be around earnings. I just don't know. We could still see it chop down. The potential is there to continually chop down low and even hit a new low before earnings. It's just a lot of space going down here. And then maybe you come back up. And I actually think it could build out like really far sideways first. So we could build like a really long-term range here in July. I say really long-term. This is really only like 4 days. This isn't that long. This is like really fast. Yeah. That actually makes sense. Something like that. Tries to go down one more time. Maybe it doesn't succeed. Maybe it does. It's all speculation. I mean, technically, could it just go up right now and just run up into, there? Sure. Could it go down and stay low into earnings? Sure. You can see the range build out has us a high liquidity level at 72.99. So my thought is they're going to try, as they may, to push it down back to that level sometime in the near future, and then we'll see. I don't know if it's going to make it though. Like, it might just leave and pump into earnings and then just kind of go after that. Hard to say. I do know that it seems built around earnings because that, again, that intersection here, well, on this chart, which is zoomed in, that looks earlier, doesn't it? So which is it? It's way earlier. Or did I just draw it in the wrong spot? I might have just drawn it in the wrong spot. Can't see the end of the line. I'm looking over here at this side. I'm looking at these points here and here and here. I really want to make sure I catch it. You can see the head and shoulder distribution. It's pretty close where it's at right now. I'm not so concerned about wicks to the upside. I'm really concerned about, I think that might be close enough. I like to see this kind of stuff here, like the little chop along it and the drop beneath it, sort of a padded area. And I might not use this top. I might use these tops because these look better to me. Yeah, I think those are stronger. This is actually really low. If it's that, that would suggest you already hit the bottom. I can't really tell. Both of them are valid because that one has more hits here. That actually looks more correct to me than the other one. But I suppose it could be either, so it did raise the, if it did come up here, it raised it a bit. Well, either way, it's situated around earnings, so there's not that many choices. It's just a bunch of little pockets. Yeah. Oh, we know it's not that one. It could just be like the middle of a structure. It doesn't really make any difference to me if it's perfect. That looks right because you see that has a trend going backwards here. See this? So I actually like this one, I think, the best. But whatever. So, anywho, you get the point. Doesn't really make a huge difference either way. We'll just kind of split the difference and say it's somewhere in here. You're at the bottom, yay! AMC is sitting at 544. It's again kind of coming up, bonking its head on that ceiling. I don't know what to expect with this. It just made a higher low. GME looking more like what we thought maybe. Slightly higher high here, going up. We'll see if it can get above this area. I haven't talked about MPW very much because I don't really know what else to talk about. I think I kind of mapped out what I thought might happen, so let's see if I was okay. I mean, the big picture here is M cross, so this is a weird gap down, but it did come back down and test near that bottom here at 477. So you remember how we were saying like 477 was a maybe level over here? It already hit it. So maybe that's done. Maybe. So the big picture was, is it going to jump these creeks? So if I drew them right, they should respect it pretty well. I'm going to look at the options chain for SBUX in a minute, but do you see this? Let's see here. So this hits a top. Man, this is a messy chart. What happened here? Just bars vomiting all over the chart. That's a huge sell down from. So why did I pick 492? All right, well, whatever. Either way, I think this is done. This looks like the jump around this guy. You can see it found support at 484. 484 was one of those levels. I remember I said it was oddly similar to like AMC because it was like 485 or something. You can see like right there at 484, it had bar coded. And I thought that was really strange, just an odd anomaly for that. Just the fact that it was the same number is just weird. I don't think much of it though. It's just a thing. I'm curious where that sell-off happened. That's very strange. I'm going to go to the minute chart. I want to see it on the minute. Here. Yeah, it's kind of where I've got this pocket, so I guess we'll just leave that there. So somebody was trying to sell down through this guy. Evidently. Oh man, this is ugly, ugly chart. I can't see jack till he's squat. There's all these gaps on it. Can't believe I'm going to do this. It's been a while. I'm going to go back here and see if I can get rid of those gaps. Oh, that's so much easier on the eyes. People made fun of me early on for using Hiken Ashi, but I love it for seeing better. It's so much easier to see. It's like clear as day right there. You're like, oh, there it is. When it was on the other one, you're like, well, I can't see anything because there's just like huge gaps between the candles. It was like impossible to see it. So that's the sell down. So it did jump over, it just didn't find support. So they dropped the price back down to hit it. So now I know that's in the right spot. This one actually looked kind of off, but it was similar. Like it's like this. So it's all pivoting around this like final little up thrust. Yeah, I got made fun of early on. People were like, "You're using Hiken Ashi? Obviously you're a bad trader." I'm like, okay. Put him in a body bag. Yeah. That's what I think of. I think of like internet bullies. Just dudes on the sideline screaming, "Yeah, we got him, zinger." All right, so we're bonking our heads right now on the ceiling at yeah. So funny. But yeah, that was I remember early on I used Hiken Ashi a lot because it's actually easier I think it's a lot easier if you're doing fractal analysis to use Hiken Ashi because it reduces all the gaps basically. That's really all it does. I mean, it doesn't really do much else. So well, I don't know, man. This is looking pretty good. It's building out above the creek, so I know it's weird, but I would just put this like over to the left a little bit and say like that's probably what we're talking about because I don't know where else it's gonna go except back down if this just distributes. But I know it's weird because I'm talking about these other guys having pullbacks and stuff. To me, it just looks like it's getting ready to go. I can't. I guess I can't be positive that it's going to do that. Like it could be because this would be your bottom here. This is the first M, then you've got another one. This comes low, so that's like your spring out. So this is your wave up, wave out. So some kind of a wave here to find support, but that's the thing is like it went down like in this harsh sell-off, high volume. I mean, just look at that. Just a massive volume candle right here. It just kind of looks like it's already established that that's the bottom, and that's strange. So it already jumped over. And normally, I would have looked for it to go beyond it and then, you know what I mean, like extend up and then kind of chop back to it, to that creek. This is usually what I see happen in the charts, just sort of a quick move. Instead, it just tanked right back through, hit that bottom. Now it's just like pressing up. I'm inclined to think it might just go because of that. I don't know for a fact, but I'm inclined to think it because of that massive push. It looks like a bottom to me, so I'm not sure. It's strange. Anyways, point is, has it made the appropriate creek crosses? Yes. What's left is jumping over, it looks like 490. So it's a pretty strong wall right there, and it might take a minute to get there. We'll see. Any other pullbacks at this point would be mostly probably just like this kind of stuff to like come back to these levels. It hasn't really been respecting, I mean, honestly, it hasn't really been respecting the creeks super well. See how it kind of like hits them, but then it's passing through them until, so I mean, I don't really know where the highest one would be. I suppose it's up here somewhere. Maybe there. You can see like the kind of like the chittering on it, like the little like barcoding right here and here. So if it did come down one more time, and then there's a buy up from it right there, you see that high volume bar right off of it here. So if it did come back down again, maybe to here, maybe. I'm being very hesitant, but maybe like there. I don't know. It could just be that that's just been established as a bottom and we're still going to trade sideways a bit more. But like anything else we talk about with the waves, it's it's bullish if it can jump the creek and find support on it. So my bigger question now with MBW is not, is it bullish? It's more about, was that the support or not? I kind of feel like it might be just because of that candle. Like, that's really fast. It's kind of unusual for something like that to happen that way, but that's the best I can give you right now. It looks right to me. So we'll go back. Don't worry if you guys are like appalled by my use of Hiken Ashi. I could have used lines, I guess. That would have been about the same. We'll go back to candles where it's a complete mess. Totally hard to see. So anywho. So yeah, I'm watching this. I don't really know, guys, with this one. It's just very like unclear. But if it gets above this point today, I'm gonna be pretty bullish on it if it can make this move today. So we'll see. There's GME's drop, second drop. So there it goes. Way earlier than expected, but not unexpected at all. So totally normal. Nothing to see here. AMC should be also dropping, totally expected, totally normal. This one was a little more accurate. It actually, we were right about it coming down. So this is a little bit problematic. So GME kept, by having this up thrust here, it actually kept its outer creek, but now it's got an accelerated one. So it's going down parabolically, just like AMC is. Yeah, so it looks to me like there was no, the second cat ear here is real small. Like, it just barely came up to 2784. So I'm going to move my line down a bit to there because I was off slightly. So I'm going to correct it. Wasn't off about the direction. It's just where it hit was really early. So I need to move my line. So that's the more accurate center mark. That's good to know. It's good to have that on the chart. So we're going to keep that one on the chart right there, that middle pink line that goes up. Because we're probably, yeah, looking back, I'm like, sure, that looks right. I was probably off by like a penny or something, thinking it was going to come up higher. Did it drop below the other one? Maybe. It's a double flush. Yeah, it did. I think it did. So, yeah, so the design of this flush motion seemed to be an up thrust followed by a downward flush. So to me, that's more typical when you're planning on dropping through something, where you break above and then you have a hard drop through something. So I think right now this is coming down to break through this bottom right here. And I've got it kind of drawn out. Maybe I'll put the green line here so you can see better this arrow. It does look like it's accelerating. So I do think this is important because now we've got two different angles. So I'm going to change these both to blue. I'll make them a little bit wider so we can see them better. These are the two cat ear creeks, and they're steeper. They're accelerating, and I think AMC is doing the same thing. They're red on this chart, but they are accelerating. What that tells me is that this is probably forming more of like a beak than it is like a wedge. So I don't expect this line right here to hold necessarily. It could eventually break pretty violently down. So I gotta just kind of forewarn you that that's a possibility. So if you're looking at that line there on that lower end, I don't know if it's going to hold support because it seems to me that the acceleration is parabolic. So the second iteration here, first iteration, second iteration, higher volume, which is good. That's actually positive because we came low. We're making higher volume bottoms, but it's accelerating. So the next one, this is all totally normal. Like I know I'm sounding like kind of like, oh, matter of fact about it. Like, oh, we're going down. Here we go, you know. But it's because it's like completely and totally normal. price action for AMC and GME, and especially AMC, to make that kind of a move down. So when I look at this, I think this is a compression, plain and simple. Like, I see that as a walk down. There's obviously a creek being met, you know, each time. There's obviously a move down. I could draw it here if you want to see that, and then here if you want to see that. So those are the two moves that you're seeing the walk down through. But it's compressing, it's accelerating, it's taking less time and more energy. So a lot more energy, a lot more volume, I think, in this compression. So we're looking at this in a positive light, because really this kind of stuff doesn't typically happen until the end times, you know. Yep. Colia? Rabino Witch. For me, yeah, I think if you drop 532, which we're on right now, I think it's likely we will. But I think if you drop it, we're going to head down towards the 520s. I think we're just going back to this creek right here. I don't think it's that complex in some ways. I know I've got all kinds of stuff on my charts, but if you focus on just like the big picture, this is the jump here. That's where we would be heading back to. But I think it's accelerating, so there's a possibility that they're trying to like drop it even beneath that creek some, maybe aiming for that 5 after all, with an acceleration. There's a challenge here in that you don't really know the angle of this arc and the steepness of the arc right away. But maybe we do. If we know where it's trying to jump over, it's hard to say though, isn't it? Here, let's do this. No, it's a little higher. So this is where I get my, yeah, they were going to get crushed though. Round 2, you know what I mean? Right back down to that level. Very strange, huh? This is good. Look, I know that selling off isn't fun, and I know that there's a fear factor to it. Like, well, if you're wrong, Booksy, and it's not good, then where are you gonna, where are we gonna go? There's always like more than one way to look at the charts, and there's always going to be people that are going to be really, really bearish about stuff like this, because they're going to see the red and they're going to say it's horrible. It's horrible. And I'm not purposely like a contrarian trader, but I think by nature, those are the kind of plays that I tend to like the most, which are trades where it looks bad, but there's an underlying like positivity to it. And until I see something that's like clearly negative, I tend to be very careful about stuff like this. But like, when we're in a bottom, like I think I can see the bottom pretty well. When we're in a top, I think I can see the top pretty well. So like, those are things that I have decent strengths at. They're not always perfect, but I have pretty good strengths with them. I can usually tell, with AMC and to some degree like, oh, this is a bottom, right? Like we were talking about this is a top, you know, and these are things that I tend to do pretty well at. There's definitely strong chances of coming down here, and I mentioned it previously. Like this should not be confusing to anybody. We got 100 people in here, and like all of you heard me say it this morning. You probably heard me say it yesterday and the day before that like I thought it was going to maybe push up and then come back down. We haven't really come back to these creek levels yet, so totally expected because there's a design to it that makes sense to me, and there's a nature to this that's almost necessary. And I think it's really positive if we get the right kind of pullback. So it's not contrary for the sake of being contrary that I'm looking at this and going like, yeah, this is awesome. I mean, like, I don't want to be negative. So if you hear me saying stuff and you're like losing money or something, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not rubbing it in. I'm looking at this like, hey, this is parabolic. Yeah, it didn't hold that bottom. That was kind of a given. So I figured that would probably be the case. And I'm trying to identify as best I can, like, where does it probably stop? So just because it's dropping hard doesn't mean I'm like going to suddenly change my targets, right? There's still a decent support here that we've had repeatedly around the 520 region, maybe down to like 518 or 19 or something. That's still like one of my main targets. Like I had that one on the chart yesterday. If it continues to do parabolic moves, you could see it drop down to 5 and get the gap fill. I think it's a possibility. Then I just kind of go and I look at the head and shoulder chart and I say, okay, well, you know, what we had on that chart tells us that that's a possibility. You know, this is the head and shoulder marker, and that's the length of the move. What I look for over here, and I've been drawing it over here, is the parallels, and potentially like where does that go? And I've had these, you know, on and off on my chart for a while, but these are the major creeks down across that parallel structure. So there's really nothing about this that's overly bad or surprising, you know, and I'm not telling you to try to catch a falling knife or anything, but if I see the right kind of bottoming action here, like I'm very, very bullish, you know. What I would love to see is basically like a repeat of what we just did here. I know it sounds weird and it may not look quite like that, but I would love to see a repeat of this price action, but like really small. I'd love to see like a bounce that kind of does this business. Even if it goes down to like 5, you know, I'd love to see this kind of a move just like this. Not a hook, but this kind of breakout across the creek, right? It's just like we saw over here. This jump across the creek that's got a big buy-in to it, like a churning up, and then a final sell down. And if that happens, and then you see it even again, very positive, you know. And we're not done yet, so I don't know exactly what it's going to look like in the end. If this goes low, then you might expect it to do it again, but low. But that's the kind of stuff I want to see in the end. I want to see another buy-in on a new level here, and then drop it one more time, and then do it again. And by that point, it's probably going to be pretty tiny. So, yeah. So if we are going to do another drop, it could be like right now, where we just kind of push up and do another drop. We may not be out of the woods yet with this parabolic move down. But we saw it coming. It's pretty easy to tell when the creek didn't reach the second. When the second move didn't reach the first creek, you're immediately, you should think, well, it could be parabolic, because that's usually what happens if that's the case. Oh yeah, so I was just making a point that like there's always more than one way to look at the chart, and another way to look at this was a widening. Yeah. So from this point forward, in order to see it be positive, this was the big drop, right? So we're looking for, and you guys are like, well, what if it keeps going? I don't know. Maybe it keeps going. We're not there yet. I could see it having another iteration out. But I was mentioning that like it was probably going to happen this way and it happened this way, and it should be good as long as we hold certain things. But this is a widening right here, and it broke down to where the base is. So as a Bolkowski target goes, it's kind of done at 520. Booksy target, this is across a creek here. This is where you would expect it to have some kind of reaction, some kind, like right there. It could go below it, but usually you get some kind of reaction to it. So everything here looks fine. And then if we get a spring, we'll come up again. Is it halted? What's going on? It's not moving. No, it's not halted. If we're going to get a spring, probably come up one more time and then dump. So if we're going to go down to that 5 level, and that's a big if, I don't know. I had it bottoming here at 520. But if we go down to that level, it'd probably be, again, a case of like we're flattening out up top, and then we would see like a second drop, maybe even another one. And something like that would be possible for like this curve, which would probably accelerate on the way down. So this is what I would look for. Great iteration if it does that. If it does that, I've got good vibes. I do. So the way I measured this arc was I used this bottom out to the creek. So this kind of cross right here. This is not an exact science. It's just something I noted that tends to work pretty well. And so what it is like a wave. And if you generate a cross through the wave, it usually points to like a future bottom. So in terms of direction, this is a really easy way to kind of pinpoint maybe direction. So by doing that, it allows me to have a couple anchors on a curve that are probably more accurate than me just kind of like eyeballing this. Doesn't mean it's perfect, just means that that's probably where you'd see a potentially more accurate curve. So I don't think the curve necessarily stops right here. It looks like it could continue. Another thing that's important to note is sometimes curves, although we like them as possible support and resistance areas, they're not like trends. So if this were to cross the curve, it might be tempting to say it's done. But that's not necessarily true, because as I've seen before in the market, if it doesn't reach this outer guy, we could be developing like a much wider curve. Like all of a sudden, oh, it didn't reach that outer creek and jump it. You could be developing like a wider curve that's significantly longer, and those are things that I always kind of like have to keep in the back of my head. I don't want that to happen, but sometimes that happens. And so if it exits the curve, I need it to, as a range, maintain support, right? Like that's not an option. It has to maintain, a support and start a breakout. Otherwise, it's not a bottom. It could potentially still continue down pretty low. And sometimes I've drawn curves that are right, but then it gets to the end and it does go across, but then it ends up breaking on the outside down. Again, this is just me observing how curves have been semi-effective and like sometimes a little bit ineffective for patterning. So just keep in mind, like, it's not perfect. This is general direction, this red line down. We still have to jump the outer creeks here, and they've been going down, again, parabolically. The curve itself is the best I could do for now, because I only have like one big cross here. You could do a second one, but it would have to be from like here to here, right? And you'd have to use to the next creek, and you'd have to use that top. And usually this is going to look like an acceleration down. So you can see that one actually intersects 520, 517. So it would imply that it's kind of done, but that doesn't, I don't know, man. It doesn't really mean much to me. Because these guys, well, sometimes, yeah, they're like that, and you're like, ooh, it's perfect. Sometimes they're not perfect, and sometimes they end up doing something like this, where they go like beyond, because they're accelerating, they could go beyond the first one. So we're like, this is like a first target's here, second target's way down here, and then it keeps going. So they're good as guides, but beyond that, I wouldn't call them anything else fancy. Like, I don't think that necessarily means that 516 has to be the stopping point. So why do it? Because they're good as guides. Like, they're really good as guides for like a parabolic move down. It's probably the best way to do it, but I just think that there's sort of a lack of surety with it, I suppose, because curves can adjust and change pretty rapidly. It's not like a trend. Trend is pretty rigid once it's built, and then you know when it breaks. Curve's a little more flexible. You could be working out a much wider curve than you're expecting, and then you're like, uh-oh, you know. Yeah, I mean, 480 is pretty close to like my 485 liquid center. So I don't know. This is another kind of hot zone. So I've got it marked off in my chart with this kind of gold bar area. What this is it's what I think is the general like center of the structure. So sometimes during a breakout, you go all the way back to center. Not always, but it's one of those things that it's a common place to find support before you exit a range, because institutions like to throw people off, and so they can go to the center of a range where people don't know if it's going to go up or down, and they buy from the center oftentimes. So yeah, do I think 480 is a potential zone where you could bounce? Yeah. I mean, I've had it marked off on my chart for a while for that reason. I don't think it's impossible, but I think there's other places here, again, that are stronger. So I would just say, yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. And if it went down there, I would say, okay, it's going down to the liquid center. And it's probably like probably a retracement at this point as well, I would imagine. Pretty close to, Fibonacci 618 retracement. So there's nothing, not to be, I guess it sounds rude, I just won't say it. But anybody can do fibs. So like if you're somebody that's wondering like, well, how can I find targets really easily? Like fibs are always good, always, because they tend to be self-fulfilling prophecies. And so it shouldn't surprise you then that like the 515 area where we're talking about support right now is a 382 fib. It shouldn't surprise you that the 530 area that we've been talking about is a 236 fib. It shouldn't surprise you that 5, which we've been talking about, is a 0.5 fib. And then that lower, the 618, is at 482. None of those things should come as a surprise to anybody who's charting, because you know that they're going to build them out that way. You know, they always do it. So like I had marked this off a while ago as the golden pocket, and I just don't talk about it every single day, but it's there, you know. And typically, again, what we see is that, I don't know what this means, so I'm going to get rid of it. Typically what we see is that, I probably did this yesterday, and I think it was about this top. What we see is that the structures that are built in a way that everything kind of makes sense. So if this build out makes sense of us coming down this low, then I'm like, sure, let's go for it. And it just depends, again, on your outlook. There's going to be people who are out there who probably look at this as a trend that's necessary to hit it again. And they're probably looking at this saying, well, I don't think we're going to take off till next Friday. We're going to come all the way down and chop into, next Friday at 485, and then we're going to go, you know. Oh, there's other people who have looked and said, well, I don't think we're going to go until we hit 450. You know, that's the 854. And then you're basically at that point, you're arguing that we're going to drop from this wave up here to this wave down here. And those same folks are probably the ones that are looking over here saying, I think this is more likely the support at 450. So like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I think anybody that's worth their salt in TA could probably make a decent argument for any of these fib levels with some amount of support, you know, from the previous areas in the range. My bottom line is this: I don't want to go beneath the liquid center, period. Like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a hook back up here again. I don't want to see that. Everything else, I probably could do some kind of mental gymnastics and just find a reason that makes sense, because it usually is built out that way. So what I've been telling you is my preference and my bias towards what levels I think are going to be the strongest. I still think above 5 feels like the best place for us, and not coming back down to the liquid center, even though, and you all know this if you've been following me for a little while, even though like that's what we did back here. You know, we came back to that liquid center zone before we took off. We did that here as well until when we broke down. We came back underneath it and then broke down. So like when I look at this, like I know that's a possibility, but the way this is built out just makes me think that that's not the most likely situation. That's all I can say about it, you know. And a lot of it has to do with these parallels running up, because the fib levels are ever present, you know, they're just there. And you can argue easily that you're going to go down here, and I would be like, yeah, well, it's the golden pocket at 480. And I would say, yeah, that makes sense. If we went to 480 and bounced and ripped, I would be like, okay, well, it hit the golden pocket and took off. What I wouldn't want is to drop below that and hook and head down to like 450, which some folks are saying. It's just not ideal for me. Like, I don't want to be below this level. I don't want to generate a push back up towards it after breaking down. And frankly, at that point, you've lost the major trend. Like, it's gone. So there are some levels where it's like, hey, at that point, you've kind of broken the chart. It's done, you know? And that's where I feel like there's a disconnect. Because some people would argue like it doesn't matter, you know, they're not going to care about that. They're not going to care about some trend. They're going to care about the local levels. And I think, you know, you look at some traders, I have high respect for them. Some of the traders I have the highest respect for, they operate like that. Stockfather's like that. He doesn't do trends. He just doesn't. You know, he does creeks like minimally within a range, but he doesn't do trends. He does ranges. He would say it doesn't make really much difference at all if it breaks that, and then it could come really low and hit a spring and do this and this. And that's great, because you need to have different opinions about how the market might interact with levels. But I'm not like that, right? Because I use the waveforms, and I'm looking at things like, well, I don't want to get stuck between you know, across. Like, I don't want to be stuck in the middle where I have to deal with now resistance on two fronts. That's the way I see it. It's like, I wouldn't want to do that. I mean, and I don't control the market, but if I'm a bull operator, I'm not sure how that would benefit me, you know? And that's where I kind of have to use my methodology and add into it, like, what would their purpose be in going that low at this point? You know, so I'm gonna have to just sort of stick to it, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I know that I've called it before. I know I've said we could come back to 485 at different times. I know I've said it probably more than a couple times that we could come back, because that's the way I did the build out. for this whole range. Like I did the whole build out based on 485 and how we might interact with that. All the same, I would at this point still have a greater preference for 5. So that's where I'm going to kind of hang my hat, I guess. And we'll see. We'll see. But, you know, bringing it to our attention is good because then we can look at it and say, well, where is that coming from, right? Where is that particular idea coming from? And is it coming from a place of intelligence and like logic and reading the chart accurately? Or is it coming from a place of like fear or hype? You know, because the fear and hype stuff is the stuff that I tend to be like, nah, I'd rather not. I don't really want to address that. The logic and the kind of smart, simple build outs where people are just using good technique and just trying to interpret the range and stuff, all of that stuff's valid to me. It's just another opinion, right? The hype and the FOMO garbage, I just don't like that stuff because of what it does to people psychologically, you know, and how it can be, you could be right. You could always guess right. You know, you could flip a coin and get it right. But like ultimately, like you're advocating for like some kind of a weird psychological dopamine rush that is causing people to gamble with their money. And I don't like that. So, that kind of stuff really bugs me. I feel like that's the most manipulative thing that you could do. So, but yeah, if you bring it to my attention, like somebody that I think is a legitimate trader and they have a different opinion, we'll observe it and we'll just look at it and we'll see what maybe they're seeing. So, yeah. So I think that you can look at those things and be objective about it. Yeah, I got 504 marked on my chart. Still looking at Friday, Monday pumps. I feel like you ask me a lot. Cash is king. You guys are funny. Yeah, right now nothing about the price action is, no, it's cool, man. I was just messing with you. But nothing about the price action right now is bad. Look, we got pi 3.14. That's a good sign, right? Put your rally caps on, gentlemen and ladies and others. Y'all. No, I'm just joking. Booksy says 3.14 is a magic number. I mean, it kind of is, but not necessarily in the market. Let's look at some other stuff. Because AMC and GME are going to be a bit depressing today, which we kind of figured. And yeah, I mean, so this is broken now below. So the good news is that we measured that earlier, and I think that it measured out to, well, I actually don't know where the middle would be, because it could be pretty high up, I guess, or it could be pretty low. How do you measure this? I guess I'll just split the difference. Yeah, like 2580s or something like that. So we're kind of in that pocket, and I mentioned that there was a creek right there, and it looks like it kind of bounced on it, but I don't know if that's the right one. Anyways, doesn't really matter. Point is, this was the region that we talked about earlier, and it could go pretty low here. I would like to see it bottom here, though. I don't really want to see it go lower at this point. It's going to go down to 25. They're doing it. The Max Payne push. I mean, Yeah, like could technically it keep selling hard and selling hard and selling hard and selling hard and selling hard. Yeah, I mean, and I think there's always like reason for it, you know. We could always look back and say there's some kind of other logic to it. And this was like a 618 on the move that started from 24 right here. But I'm sure that if you go from the bottom, it's probably 24, you know. It's probably that low spot, I would imagine. Yeah, it's the gap. So there's a higher gap there at 24. So like there's always a possibility, a reason that you could come down really low on a retracement. I could find a lot of good reasons to come low. I would prefer to not do that, for obvious reasons, but and it also kind of messes with some of the setup when you have like bigger throwbacks. You then have to measure it out differently, so we might have to do some adjustments if they go seriously low. What is that? Compass pathways? I don't know what that means. Is that a some kind of a company? Pathways American Depository Shares, PLC. CMPS. I don't know. It kind of looks to me like it's trying to hold a support right now. So if it holds it, yeah, it'll go, but it's also just topped off. It's hard to say. So it's a creek crossing at the moment. Guitar church. It's funny. Yeah, this looks like sorry. 1 2 1 2. Yeah, I think it's an M cross, but I think it may have gone like too far. So it's walking out of long-term trends is what it's doing. But I guess the reason I would caution about this is that there's a gap level right here in the middle. It looks kind of like a center mark, and this is where the bigger shape went out. So with M crosses, I always look at these as the waves, right? But then there's a bigger wave here. There's always a bigger fish, right? So there's a bigger wave here, which is one that basically if you just do like the bigger shapes, this kind of gives you an indication of where that is. So the little waves are good. There's nothing wrong with them. The big wave I'm curious about. It seems like it didn't actually come back to check anything. And now I'm seeing like the RSI looks like it's pulling back down pretty hard. So you'd have to ask the question like, well, where is it going to go on that bigger wave? And it's tricky. Tricky. So it left this behind. That's a possibility right there. It's come all the way back down to this guy. And then it looks to me like it already left a steeper trend behind, though there might be one here. Looks like it left that one already. That one's done. So it's like a parabola, right? It's kind of the same thing we've been talking about on AMC and GME. It's like you got a good buy-in here that drove the price back up high, but now you're looking at a retracement, and I think that, frankly, I don't know for a fact it's gonna just, if it's gonna go, it's gonna go fine, but I don't think it pushed over the top. You might get kind of a double top or something, but if I were just guessing based on this setup, I would say it's probably going to come down first, which means it may not hold that creek break. And it makes sense to some degree because if you look back, these are just wicks. They're not, none of these were really very considerable trading. So like everything above this mark, between this little spot and this little spot, wasn't really traded. So now when I look at this, I'm like, okay, so what might make the most sense? So by the way, you don't need to tell me if this is going up. Like I hope you don't need me to tell you that. If it holds support here above this creek and then it continues to advance, it's advancing. You know, there's no need to worry. If it goes over 775, it's probably advancing, right? That's kind of, this is the way it would happen, you know, in an advancement. I think that's a given. So hopefully you don't need me to tell you that. But if it were to come back down, I'm actually favoring that gap fill because you can see like where they traded high, high, low, low, and they left the middle. Now liquidity has already been traded, but they didn't come down and find support on this level. So it would make some sense to me to go ahead and trade through this channel down to this intersection right around the 0.5. That gives you the gap fill. And then this is a great place to kind of build out an exit and a real like creek cross and like a final buy-in. So I'm just kind of observing like this wasn't ever traded really. And if I were just to assume that it's going to keep going, I'd probably look for a gap fill there and then continuation. Maybe that works out till earnings too in August, which isn't that far away. So we'll see. I don't know. There's not one size fits all. I just think this makes the most sense to me is to go ahead and trade the region here like that you haven't really traded. Probably be like this. And this also would chop along maybe the hourly moving average to find support on that again above it here. So this would like look like it pierces through it and then drops it. This would look like it's rejecting it and then it's crossing over perhaps at the last minute. Honestly, sometimes we see this go low through like a trend or something. This happens on AMC a lot. It'll actually drop beneath slightly a trend and trade like below, almost like a spring would, but while it's crossing a creek. So any of that seems possible to me. Yeah, so maybe 665 and then potentially at that point you could see it continue. Is there any other reason why I might hit 665 and then continue? Yes, so there's always a good reason, right? That's a good reason. See that wave down and then back down to hit it? This would be a really important back test because it was a really important and significant supply and demand zone in 2023, which, I mean, anytime you have, back in December, anytime you have like a, I bet even farther it might even be important, just depends. Yeah, see that bottom? This was way back in May of 2022. That's where it first hit that bottom. So absolutely, I think it's necessary to come back above there and hold that support. This is a monster chart, huh? It's big. This is a pretty good one too. You found it gives a good pick. It's already jumped the creek, so you see that? And made a higher low. Yeah, I'd be waiting for it to go back down to I kind of look this up. Want to know what this is about. Yeah, I'm gonna add an alert low because I mean it could go high first and then come back, which is definitely a possibility. Like it could race up. Who knows? There's all kinds of levels up here that could get hit. But if it did do that, it might have like a really nasty sell down later. I'd prefer to do it now, right? That's always my opinion is always like, hey, let's just get it over with. Rip the band-aid off, go down now, because then you have support. I would imagine it probably wouldn't go above this level here, which is 791, which is kind of where we are anyways. Well, maybe right there actually, maybe 830. So if it went up first, I'd be a little more concerned about it selling off after earnings. If it ran up into earnings, does that make sense? Completely different scenario, but it seems like a possibility because if you're trying to generate a sell-off, you could push it as high as you could, really get this overbought and then dump it hard and come really far back for some kind of major retracement. And this, my guess is that level, yeah, right there. So I picked that out because of this drop off right here. You see where it's kind of basing? See how it's kind of going to go sideways right here into this little valley? I don't know. You can kind of visually see those moves where they're sort of chopping into a sideways action right before they drop. I always kind of take a mental note of those. And then if you look at the big picture, it's like, oh, it could potentially go all the way up there. And then you're like, because that's where the level drop was, and there's a support here as well. But then you do the fib extension, you're like, I see you now. There it is. So yeah, right now it's the 0.5. Later it would be the 618 potentially. So yeah, I'm hesitant to say it's going to keep going right now. But if it did, I would say it could potentially go all the way up to 837. And then if it doesn't go up right now, I think we're more likely going to go there later. And I don't know if you necessarily have to see it ever come back down again after that, but that would be a better situation. So I think a stronger buy-in here would be around 670 if it can come back. So I put an alert on here because I think that's a good buy. It could be a really good setup. And it's a good chart. Yeah, you don't want to get this later. You want to go ahead and get it over with now. And the way it's forming is definitely iterative, which is also a positive, in my opinion. As normally, and there it is again, there's that flat top right there. So it's happening, it's just really rapid. So normally these are, I don't know, that's like almost too fast. What? There it is. There's the selling. It's climaxing again. Boom, boom, boom. Is it too low? I don't know. It could be. It might be too low. They may be trying to cross it down after all. I hate this kind of stuff. Sometimes I like it, but sometimes I kind of hate it because it's like really fine-tuned moves. Like it dropped below a little before on the 16th. That's why I'm not really sure if it matters too much. It's still the target level that I wanted, at least initially, so I'm not like upset. I just don't know if it came so low that it's going to now try to generate a hook off of it and push low. But I guess if it does, it does. So if it does, it does. And this feels like too fast to be another sell-off, but like it didn't even remotely get close to that. I was just guessing on this one. So it actually looks like it was targeting the same spot. So if we had pinned this target earlier right there, we probably would have nailed it. That would have looked really cool, wouldn't it? If I didn't do that, I was like intentionally saying it might come over here or something. But it does look like it pinched it, so it was targeting 517. At least this initial 1, 2, 3 move right here. So now I'm curious. We'll see what happens now that we're here. Aren't you excited? Y'all are like, what? We're so low, Booksy. Now we got to go all through all these creeks again. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we may not be over. I might be a little early, but this looks right to me. I think this is a build out now for a range area. So here. Looks good. Looks good. Looks good. Man, if I see the right kind of bottom, you guys, I'm going to be like super hype. This is early. This is early. So what would we need to see here? I said earlier I wanted to see it kind of iterate again. It is really low on like the 3 minute. Let's check like 30 minute. Very good. Came way down. That's great. Great, great, great. We're almost oversold. That's good. Good, good, good. You definitely feel like you're a stone's throw away from 5. You're like, why don't we just drop? I mean, it's possible because we could have like a range here that does like a spring, like a deep kind of a spring drop that basically is like a spring on the bigger. This could just be building a floor again, sort of like a phase B floor, and you could still have a drop later. There's a lot of creeks here to jump. There's a lot of things that need to happen. But so far so good. Interesting. So this crossed back down, but never advanced. Just got stopped. I think it's just going to be pinned, though. We'll see what happens. I think it's going to just kind of come down again. Maybe we're going to go to that 482 again, finally. That would be a higher low here. I'm talking about not 482 on AMC, but 482 on MPW. The numbers are getting really similar, so I'll try to make sure I call the ticker as well. I mean, it looks good to me. There's some things that still need to happen. We haven't gotten out of anything yet. I mean, there's the creeks themselves are still present, like the 2 major ones here. Really 3 major ones are still present. This is basically how you'd work your way back out. This is basically how you'd work your way back out. The way I was talking. We worked our way back out over these creeks here. Yeah, this is basically how you'd work your way back out. So, yeah, I'm thinking we're still going to see it a little more low. I don't feel like this came low enough. I think we're going to come down a bit more. No more, Booksy, no more. I do not want to go down there. Too bad. We're going down. But it is dark and there is no healthy light down there. It is bottomless pit of despair. Yes, you will feel it in your bones. You guys would get so annoyed if I did the rest of the stream in that voice. People would be like, I'm never coming back. It's like going to a cat cafe and getting a bunch of cat hair in your coffee and you're like, yep, this ain't for me. Have you been to a cat cafe, Booksy? No. Will you ever go to one? No. Why not? Because I basically live in a cat cafe. I literally have like 6 cats. I'm so sick and tired of them. They're always here. Groot? Yeah, that's kind of what Groot sounds like, although Steve Carell's, that's almost like Russian. I don't even know what it's supposed to be. It's a goofy voice. I can't really do minions. I don't think I've ever tried. I'd have to listen to them first. Voices are fun until they're not. They're always like funny for like an instant, and then they're like super not funny. It's not like I wanted to have 6 cats ever in my life. 5 are more officially ours. One of them I call Ghost Cat, and he's been getting fed every morning lately. You're like, just don't feed him. I tried, but he's like really dumb and kind of derpy, and he always comes to our house with like injuries, and he has this really ridiculous derpy face. Like his eyes are always like half closed and they kind of look different directions. And I just can't. He's like ugly cute. I just can't deny him food. And he's not mean. He's kind of annoying because he pees on stuff still because he's never been whatever, neutered or spayed, whatever it's called. And my other cats didn't really like him at first, but they just kind of started ignoring him. Like they just thought like he was fine. And then we got another one we call Smithy Cat. Smithy Cat's also one that comes around. Smithy Cat is horrible. Horrible, mean cat. That's the only cat right now I'm like running away more frequently. But our cats are all really sweet. The 3 that are inside cats are mostly sweet. They were the birth child. They were the birth child. They were the litter of one of the outdoor cats because we couldn't get her whatever, spayed or neutered in time. I forget what it's called for male and female, but like she was like 3 months old when she got pregnant, and I didn't realize cats could get pregnant that fast. I knew they could get pregnant quick, but we had actually scheduled to get her, fixed, and then she got pregnant, and I'm like, well, I'm not gonna, take her kittens away. We managed to adopt one of the 4 out, but there's too many stray cats in this town. People don't want cats because there's so many cats in this town. Like everybody's got an outdoor cat because there are just a bunch of feral cats everywhere. So it was really hard. We tried to adopt them out, but like nobody wanted them. They were super cute. It would have been easy if they met the right person, but nobody wanted little kittens. So we kept 3 of them, and now they're all like 2 years old, and they're really comfortable. And then the 2 outdoor cats, those were the first ones. Their mom had died like a couple years ago. Their mom was kind of a crazy feral cat. We called her Valley Cat. I don't remember why. Valley Cat was nasty until her final day. And then she was really sweet. And I let her have a comfy place where she passed away. I buried her in our yard, so I gave her that. She was a mean cat. And she scratched me something good. So we've basically got like cat generations now. It's like a lineage of cat heritage that I can talk about. She begot her, and her begot them, and they begot those. And it's like, okay, why didn't you just do what you're supposed to do? I did. We spayed and neutered all the new ones. No one's going to have any babies right now. That's not happening. They're done. And we're not going to have more cats. But Ghost Cat, I can't not feed him. He's just so ridiculous. He's just so dumb. And like he won't leave anyways. So one day I just went out there and I was like, all right, are you mean, And I put my hand out and he just kind of rubbed against it. And I was like, all right, he's not mean. You're like, you put your hand out for a stray feral cat? Yeah, that's the kind of person I am. I'm probably the reason we have so many cats. So you must be a cat person, Booksy. No, I'm not a cat person. I kind of don't like cats. It's very weird. It's a weird like love-hate relationship. I love them because I love them. I love them because I took care of them when they were kittens and like wiped boogers out of their eyes, and you know what I mean? Like I care for them because I cared for them. And I still care for them. But like I'm not really a cat person. They kind of annoy me, and I prefer to have like a dog. But we're not getting a dog. This is not gonna happen. I had a dog for like 19 years. My dog was so old. Super, super fortunate that I had a dog for that long. But it was one of those dogs that I had since I was young. So it really was a coming of age dog. And like, I don't think I'll ever have a dog like that again. Now it would just be like a man's dog, you know, or a dog for my child. So it was a strange relationship. And after that dog passed, which just killed me, you know. I mean, I knew it was coming, and we put him down. We went out of our way to get someone to come to the house to do it, and I laid with him in his last days and last moments. It was hard, man. But after that, I kind of was like, I don't really know if I want another lifelong animal right now. You get kind of, some people are like immediately like, I need another dog. I'm going to replace this dog. But for me, it was like, he wasn't really just some fixture in my life. He was like my friend, you know, like he was there for like a life. And he didn't obviously understand everything that was going on. He's a dog. But it felt wrong to just like be like, oh, let's go replace him. Instead, I was more like, he wasn't like filling some void in my life. He was like just this really loyal creature that was my friend and companion, you know? So we talked about maybe adopting older dogs who were like senior dogs. There's a lot of senior dogs don't get adopted because they got medical issues. And so we were like, maybe we could foster or adopt like old dogs and give them like comfortable final years of their life. But then cats showed up on our porch and the rest is history. So yes, I have like 6 cats now. I basically live in a cat cafe. I've learned a lot about cats. I have a greater respect for them. My parents always kept cats growing up, but I never really liked them. I always kind of stayed away from them. I genuinely like never pet them. Well, like, I don't know. I guess my siblings like the cats. I don't know. But I was always just like, yeah, whatever. That's not my cat, you know. I'm not going to pet it. But now I have an army of cats, and they follow me around the house because I work from home. So they're always here. And they're always following me around, getting under my feet. And I don't get it, man. I'm like, I don't know why you guys love me so much because I'm not really into you most of the time. And yet they still follow me around, and they're like, the bearded one, he feeds us. Let us meow at his doorstep. Then he would come for us and feed us food. And I'm like, gosh, yeah, I will, because I have to. Because I'm not going to treat the animal poorly. My cousin ended up with a girl who kept having the same thing as you did. At some point, she had 30 cats. Yeah, you got to be really careful. They just don't. I didn't know, but yeah, you guys now all know. All 70 of you in here can hear me. Female cats can have babies really young, like as early as 3 or 4 months. So like you need to get them taken care of quickly because they will reproduce as soon as they go into heat, especially if you've got other cats around, like feral cats. As soon as they go into heat, they're going to be knocked up. I mean, it's horrible, but that's just the way it is. I felt bad for her. I was like, man, she's like basically still like a child, you know, in my eyes. I mean, I know cats are different, they age differently, but I was like, geez. So, yeah, now you know. Just be careful. We nipped it in the bud as quickly as we could. So thankfully, like all of our cats are spayed and neutered now, but my wife is really angry with me about Ghost Cat. She's like, why did you do this? You don't even like cats that much. I'm like, I don't know why. I guess because he just looks ridiculous to me. He looks like he needs a friend. And he's so pathetic. I just pity him so much. I can't help it. I don't know what it is. And she's like, we don't need any more cats. I'm like, I'm not trying to adopt him. I'm just feeding him, which is the same thing. I don't know. Part of me wants to just take him and get him fixed. Maybe when I can afford it, I'll do it. They have like these like clinics that they put on sometimes where you can get like a cheaper, rabies shot or a cheaper, whatever. Those things are good for when you're in a pinch and you've got a feral cat infestation. It was heartbreaking this year though. We had like so many, it's just horrible. I don't even want to say it, but it was a tough year for the cats in our neighborhood because they regularly reproduce. I think most of them only live like 2 or 3 or 4 years. They have really short lifespans. We start kind of picking them out because of their colors, but they slowly like come and go, or they gradually come and go. So like Moo Cat is gone. I don't know what happened to him. And we call our cats like regular names, but then all the outside cats, I call them cat. I don't know why. The feral cats, I'll just be like Valley Cat, Moo Cat, Smithy Cat, Ghost Cat. But our indoor cats, we don't call them cat. I just call them like Otto, Beazle, Imogen, Edgar, Zelda. Like our cats, I never put cat. I don't know what it is. I'm just now noticing that. But yeah, I name the cats outside, and we don't really interact with them, but they come and go, and it's horrible, man. This year was bad. Like a lot of feral cats disappeared, and the the kittens did not do well. I feel really horrible. But they always have like a litter every year, usually twice a year. You get like a litter of kittens popping up out of nowhere. It was just a bad year for kittens. And then I've got these raccoons, these 2 raccoons that live in our sewer gutter right near the house. And you might say, like, well, why don't you just get an exterminator and just go, like, whack them, or pick them up? Because they don't really do anything. They're not, like, they're super benign. Like, I know they can eventually get rabies and junk, but we have, like, armadillos and raccoons and all kinds of stuff, Got that coyote running through across the yard the other day when we were streaming that one time. Just animals, I don't really want to like call animal control for every single thing under the sun. It's not like super deadly, but these raccoons are super chill. They'll like poke their heads out while you're driving by and you can just like have a conversation with them. I know. Like, why was there a really sudden pause there? Does Booksy just talk to random animals that can't understand him? They just sit there. They just kind of sit there and listen to you. It's really funny. And they just poke their head out and listen to you talk to them. It's hilarious. I've done it like 2 or 3 times now. And I'm like, hey, raccoon, how's it going? And I just pretend like they're just like a neighbor. I'm like, business treating you well? It's going good? And they just kind of stare at you. And there's 2 of them, and sometimes like the second one will poke his head out like, hey, who are you talking to? I'm just talking to this human. This human in this vehicle. Yeah, what's he up to? I don't know. He seems to think I understand him, but I don't know a word he's saying. You gotta have a little bit of joy in the simple things in life, I guess. Some of you are like, just for the love of God, talk about stocks, Booksy. Hey, it's that time of the day, okay? It's lunch hour coming up. We don't have to talk about this nonstop when it's doing stuff that's not super, super interesting. Nothing really has changed from this morning. It's really been mostly sideways and down, which is what was expected today, at least on my part. I don't know. I feel like we may very well be at the end, but I don't think that we've come quite low enough. The more I just kind of look at it and measure it, I feel less certain about that. And I'm wondering if we're going to chop here or if we're just going to go ahead and drop low. I'm not hugely in favor of a drop all the way down to 25. We talked about that as a max pain level and how that's certainly something that you could make a case for on an accelerated drop like this. I don't think that's necessary to go that low. And I think that when you look at the chart, really 26.20, which is kind of where we are now, this is really the better level to hold. If you're talking about levels, this is a stronger level to hold. It's like AMC. We're talking about you could go to 5, but 520 is probably a better level. You could go to 480, but 5 is probably a better level. And this has to do with the fact that we already built out, you know, on top of this range. And I think a lot of folks, when they see stuff like this, they're immediately like symmetry, symmetry, symmetry. Like it has to do exactly what it was on the other side. Not so. You know, there's symmetry when there's a reason for it. So if you have a creek cross that kind of comes down that could get you to 25, and there's one right here, you know, that you could use. If you have something like that, yeah, you can use that, and you can use that and say, well, I think it's going to go double check that creek. That's the one, you know. But otherwise, like, I wouldn't go and say it has to be 1-to-1 with the left side or something. Like, that's very rarely the case anyways. And if you look at previous breakouts, I mean, you can find it sometimes. There's a little bit of a symmetrical nature to it. This one has a little bit of that. But largely, I would say that the symmetrical nature is actually in this drive up, not in this kind of like bigger picture, although maybe it's a little bit of both. And all I'd be really looking for is just a strong support bottom. So I favor that 2630s, which I marked off this morning, which is kind of where we came to, as my likely place to build a base and then return. And then AMC, sort of the same thing, but right here. So both of them are in a position where could you see another drop? You know, could they have one more accelerated drop down and fill gaps 5 and 25? Yes. Do I think that is the best case scenario? Maybe not. You know, I think that it would be better for us to not do that. And then on the whole, when I look back at this, I'm like, yeah, I mean, ultimately, do I really want to go below this bar here going up? No, I don't. Will I go below it? Maybe. You know, I might. Maybe this is hard to define perfectly, but it's a pretty easy to see, like, parallel. And the idea of this symmetry would be that you're pushing off here and kind of building out these shoulders, right, as you're ascending. And that's where this is more bullish than bearish, in my opinion. So when we get through the end of this, you can see the widening occurring and then that breakdown. This is what we wanted to have happen. And it's just, where does it go? And it's a question of whether you think that this build out is enough. You know, and if you don't think it's enough to stop here, then yeah, 5 or even significantly lower may make sense to you. You know, I'm not going to kind of sit here and say that I think that, you know, everybody else's opinion is 100% wrong or something. Like, I can always make a case for other people. I'm not going to chart for other people, like, what their case is. I'm not going to pretend like that I 100% agree with them if I don't 100% agree with them. But, like, you can make cases for coming down low, you know. And we did that earlier. There's a Fibonacci retracement here. It's pretty low. I'm just in favor of as simple as I can, like, looking at where is the best place to gain support right now. And I would think it's here. I would prefer that. So it is biased. But also, I have this other idea in my mind of what I expect to see with these parallels. And I don't know if other people look at that kind of stuff the way that I'm looking at it. So to argue the case might be a moot point, you know. So this ended up not being what happened because we ended up going parabolic. So if you're looking at this right chart, I had designed it around the idea that we were going to stay kind of flat and push down into 522 potentially. The level is still there, and we've thus far respected both of these levels, but it ended up going really parabolic. And I didn't chart that on this one. I charted on this one earlier today. So if you're just kind of tuning in, you're like, well, that didn't happen. Well, no, it didn't. But we were monitoring it on a different chart, and I was charting it over here saying, like, I didn't think it was going to hold. So we weren't even looking at this guy recently. I'm a bit concerned about where we are, that we're not going to hold this. And I know that they were using this as a way of starting a sell down. It's clearly going, again, in that kind of parabolic narrowing. So I didn't do it here, but I kind of did. I kind of have it going to like 506. I think you could make a pretty strong case that this goes down to that 504 level if you wanted to. So we're still going to have to kind of monitor for that and see what happens. I mean, I knew this was a possibility for whatever it's worth to you guys. We talked about maybe 5, but I'd like for 5 to be the stopping point. I don't really want to go back to 480s. I prefer not to do that at this point. So, yeah, we'll see. That was a pretty big knockdown. Hard to say. I think you could make an argument there's still like strong divergence, you know, and that it still needs to correct, but all the same, you know, coming back low on RSI while the price is really high up is a really big plus. So I'd like to see it again bottom sooner than later. This actually looks more like a channel on the 1 hour. To me, it does. It looks like a pretty strong like channel down. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, I think we're in a good place. Go back to talking about cats. No, those weren't cats I was talking about. I was talking about raccoons. The Midwest Disney princess. Cats are the only animal that's friends with humans but are still feral. Yeah. Isn't that weird? That's funny. Yeah. You need to take a vacation. I know. We're actually thinking we might try to. The summer months are coming to an end. It's just been so bloody hot that it's hard to want to do anything. There's not really many places to take a good vacation and be inside that aren't just like money pits, you know. A lot of times vacation's just about getting out and doing stuff outside, out and about, you know. We'll see. We'll see. Even if it's just like a day or two, I think it would be good to go on a little hiatus. Yeah, it's strange, huh? Head and shoulder. I mean, raccoons are cute, but they're definitely like not always super friendly. Sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. They get kind of used to people and then they be a little bit more friendly, but I've seen some pretty angry raccoons before, you know, hissing at you and stuff. Not like a possum, but just they can get kind of mad. Just like any creature. Okay, so LPSN. I don't know what that is. Live Person Incorporated. Okay, 4 hour is kind of toasty. 1 hour or one daily is toasty. Looks kind of like it's squeezing up. Weekly is just kind of getting started. So this would just tell me that there's probably going to be a longer term trend shift maybe that might be incoming, but it's going to have a lot of down and sideways still. This is a strong divergence here on the weekly. You know, if you look at this downtrend over the last, I don't know, year, started in 2022, it looks like. Pretty strong. Maybe a widening spread, but I mean, this kind of stuff's a little tricky because, like, it's not really meeting the sides very well. So anytime I see that, I just sort of question whether it's actually considered a widening. You know, a real good widening will have a lot of hits on the, like it'll have at least 2 on each side. So this one's kind of, I don't know, kind of debatable, but nonetheless, it's a creek. So you might expect eventually to get back up to this level. And I use triangulation quite a bit, but somewhere around December of this year, it could be at like 268, potentially. Again, like, why would that matter? I don't know. Just kind of go back and look. It's not the most significant level ever, but there is a liquidity gap here, and right where it's at right now actually might be more important. You can see the bottom here when it was stuck in 2001. It hasn't really been down there in a while, so yeah, I don't know what else about this to say other than, like, it's probably changing direction, but it might take some time, you know. This to me looks like a potential change in direction. I mean, it's a weekly, it's not insignificant. But, you know, I don't think that it's good to ignore like a daily or 4-hour time frame. So anytime this has been overbought, severely overbought on the daily in the last few years, here and here, it's had a pretty significant retracement all the way back down. So what would be a difference would be, instead of retracing all the way back down, it's just kind of coming back to like maybe just under 50. So maybe in a more bullish scenario, we stay, you can see back here, like, see how it kind of favors like above 50, and then when it's going down, it favors below 50 on RSI. So back here, it's like, we don't, while we're in an uptrend, we don't really spend a whole lot of time below 50. But when we're in a downtrend, we don't really spend a whole lot of time above 50. It's like the inverse. So I would say that, like, you might see that shift happen, and then basically you kind of get to this place where it's sort of rattling around the top. So while it's in an uptrend, potentially, if it's changing direction here, this could sort of stay, you know, above the 50 and just kind of keep retesting the top. And that's how I'd probably read the daily from here. So, all right, so that's like big picture analysis. And then coming down to like shorter term, four hours not really that different. It's probably about the same story, although it does look like 4 hour more frequently kind of goes across the range. So that little rule that I told you may only really apply to strongly to the daily. All right, so this looks like a deep retracement. Looks like a more or less like a golden pocket retracement here. That dipped a little low to the 786. That left, so it's a possible wave formation. It looks like a little bit of an inverted head and shoulder. That might be designed to kind of get you above. So I'm going to look at that shoulder height and then sort of measure it up. So maybe 142 as like a high would make sense. And then we'll see. probably chop for a bit. Let me check the fib extensions. Okay, well, 142 is the 1414 fib. So I'm thinking that's probably right. And not all big moves go like crazy, crazy high. 1618 is a really common one for a wave out. So that's still like the same region. So you may get a price up in this area before it kind of tops out on this, and then it needs to come back. Yep. And honestly, I know it sounds weird, but this is like one of those that I think, though I'm not positive, I think it could end up having a pretty long-term, I don't think it's going to come all the way back down, but I think it could have a pretty long-term wave 4. So if it hits this top, you know, I would expect it to start down in a, you know, like kind of a manner like that or something. Hard to say. I can't predict like a squeeze on things. If things just go crazy, they just go crazy. But I don't really see any reason to rapidly advance here just yet. It feels like you'd want to buy back down to like 92 cents. Usually these guys have some kind of a problem when they can't keep above $1. So this built out at 86 cents. This built out at $1. We'll see. Yeah, I mean, this could be in a pretty long term. It looks like a long time, but it's really just end of July into like October or September. And that, so it looks like a ridiculously long sort of sideways action, but it's really not that bad. And this is like November move kind of stuff. So it would make sense if it's going to have another wave. If there's a sideways action until then, I wouldn't bat an eye at it. If this was like the fourth wave here and it came down, I'd be pretty content with that if that's what happens. I mean, there's always a possibility of a steep pullback here that chops low, but we'll see. I feel like this is more likely, I suppose. Let's check one more creek. Yeah, there it is. So it should be like a wave cross, right? The whole point of like that fifth wave should be some kind of a cross, you know? So 3 crosses here, swings back down, and then goes low into November, and then probably around elections or something, you know? It's just a thought. This could come back up, jump that creek, be done. Yeah, this would also test the 4-hour moving average. So like coming back down would test the 4-hour right here. Yeah, my son is playing Mario Maker, so I'm probably going to go hang out with him in a minute. It's a lot better than hanging out with you losers. Just joking. No, but seriously. It's lunchtime, so I'm probably going to head out in a minute. Yeah, so far so good. I mean, what am I supposed to say? there's nothing else to say about GME and AMC right now. So far, so good. I know it doesn't sound good, doesn't feel good, but I'm telling you, like, if this can bottom really well here, it's going to be really positive. I really do think that. So, and the fact that we got down here so quickly really just means one of two things. Either we're still gearing up for another drop and we're really going to waste a whole lot more time by going low, or we're going to break out a little earlier. So we got to just kind of wait at this point and see. But for now, we're buying off of lows. You know, it's overbought or oversold on the 15-minute, pulling back up. I mean, it's looking fine. It's oversold on the 6-minute. I mean, there's just, like, short term, we should see some chop here regardless. And if we see chop long enough, we might exit what I think is like a parabolic move down. We will see. Like, it's hard for me to tell unless I'm looking like really close. I could try. It's really hard for me to tell if a move is like an iterative move is done by just kind of glancing at it. It can be very challenging. To me, I would suggest that it is, but it could be that we're building out like sideways right now, another one. You see how this could easily just be like a halfway one? And I had it thinking like, oh, it's going to go lower, but yeah, we could be building out another one, so it's going to be close. I think if we's probably going to be the steepest. Yeah, we could see one more. It's hard, man. Like, I know they're iterating. I know. Why is it doing this? Oh, well. I guess it's just meant to be that I get out of here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a lunch.